Movies have become ingrained within our culture, so much so that many fans create highly detailed theories attempting to answer some of the more provoking and mysterious aspects of a film. Some theories even take on a life of their own, forever changing a public perception of the original project. This is the Movie Fan Theories Iceberg. Darth Jar Jar Theory from Star Wars Episode I, The Phantom Menace, suggests that the bumbling Gungan character Jar Jar Binks was originally intended to be a secret Sith Lord and the true master manipulating events behind the scenes. In the Star Wars prequel trilogy, Jar Jar appears as comic relief who accidentally helps the heroes through clumsy actions. However, this theory proposes he was meant to be revealed as the puppet master controlling Senator Palpatine, who later becomes Emperor. The evidence begins with Jar Jar's combat effectiveness. Despite appearing clumsy, he destroys multiple battle droids during the Battle of Naboo, using moves that mirror drunken boxing martial arts techniques. His seemingly random flailing consistently eliminates enemies in ways that would be nearly impossible by accident. Jar Jar demonstrates suspicious hand gestures throughout the films that coincide with characters changing their minds or agreeing with him. When he waves his hand while speaking to Boss Nass, the Gungan leader suddenly becomes more cooperative. This mirrors the Jedi mind trick technique used by Force users. His political maneuvering proves crucial to Palpatine's rise to power. Jar Jar proposes giving Chancellor Palpatine emergency powers in the Senate, directly enabling the creation of the Empire. For a character portrayed as simple-minded, he shows remarkable understanding of complex political procedures. Behind the scenes, evidence includes director George Lucas describing Jar Jar as having a quiet dignity beneath his exterior. Lucas also cited silent film actor Buster Keaton as inspiration, noting how Keaton appeared clumsy while being incredibly skilled. Actor Ahmed Best, who played Jar Jar, has hinted in interviews that there were deeper layers to the character that never made it to screen. Additional evidence includes Jar Jar lip-syncing along with other characters' dialogue in several scenes, suggesting he knew what they would say in advance. His survival rate throughout dangerous situations far exceeds what luck alone could explain. The theory gained significant traction in the 2010s when fan analysis videos highlighted these details, leading to widespread discussion about whether Lucas originally planned a dramatic reveal that was scrapped due to negative fan reaction to the character. James Bond is a codename. This theory stems from the entire James Bond film franchise spanning over 6 decades. The theory suggests that James Bond is not the real name of a single secret agent, but rather a codename passed down between different operatives working for MI6. This would explain how Bond has remained active from the 1960s through the present day, despite being portrayed by multiple actors with vastly different appearances, ages, and personalities. The evidence supporting this theory centers on the dramatic shifts between different Bond eras. Sean Connery's Bond operated during the height of the Cold War, while Roger Moore's version dealt with different global threats in the 1970s and 80s. Pierce Brosnan's Bond navigated the post-Cold War world, and Daniel Craig's incarnation faced modern terrorism and cyber threats. Each actor brought distinctly different interpretations to the character. Connery played Bond as a ruthless, serious operative. Moore emphasized wit and charm. Timothy Dalton returned to a darker, more violent approach. Craig portrayed Bond as emotionally damaged and psychologically complex. The theory argues these represent different agents assuming the same identity. Timeline inconsistencies further support this idea. References to past missions and relationships often contradict previous films. Some movies appear to reset continuity entirely, suggesting new agents taking over the role. The theory also explains how Bond maintains relationships with recurring characters like M, Q, and Moneypenny across decades, despite these supporting characters also being played by different actors over time. However, the theory faces challenges. In Skyfall, Bond visits his childhood home and family grave, showing the name James Bond belonged to his parents. This suggests at least Daniel Craig's version uses his real name. Additionally, some films reference events from earlier Bond adventures, implying continuity of the same person. Every Disney film is connected. This theory proposes that all Disney animated movies exist within the same shared universe, with characters, locations, and events interconnected across different films and time periods. The theory suggests that rather than being standalone stories, Disney's animated catalog represents different chapters of one massive narrative spanning centuries. Characters from one movie appear in others, families are related across films, and magical elements create a unified world where fairy tales coexist. The most prominent evidence comes from direct character appearances. Rapunzel and Flynn Rider from Tangled appear as wedding guests in Frozen, establishing that these characters exist in the same world. The Duke of Weselton in Frozen mentions trade relations with Arendelle being cut off from other kingdoms, specifically referencing Corona, which is Rapunzel's kingdom. Some theorists connect Elsa and Anna's parents to other Disney films. The royal couple dies in a shipwreck, and one popular extension suggests they survive and later become Tarzan's parents in the jungle. This would make Tarzan the brother of the Frozen sisters. The Little Mermaid provides another connection point. King Triton's trident appears briefly in Frozen during Elsa's coronation ceremony. Ursula's Garden of Souls in The Little Mermaid contains what appears to be references to other Disney villains' victims. Beast's library in Beauty and the Beast contains books that some fans identify as representing other Disney stories, suggesting these tales exist as historical accounts within that world. Geography also supports the theory. Many Disney films take place in European kingdoms that could feasibly neighbor each other. The Germanic and Scandinavian settings of Tangled, Frozen, and Sleeping Beauty could represent different regions of the same continent during different eras. Magic serves as the unifying element across films. Whether it's fairy godmothers, genies, or magical curses, supernatural forces operate consistently across different Disney movies, suggesting a world where magic follows established rules rather than being isolated incidents.
Like this video and subscribe to Maker.
The Pixar Theory. This theory proposes that every Pixar movie exists within the same connected universe, following a single timeline that spans from prehistoric times to the far distant future. Rather than being separate standalone films, each Pixar movie represents a different point in this shared world's history. The theory centers around three main groups that shape this universe's evolution: humans, animals, and machines. According to this timeline, the events begin with Brave in medieval Scotland, then progress through modern-day films like Toy Story and The Incredibles, before eventually reaching the post-apocalyptic future shown in Wall-E. The evidence supporting this theory includes numerous visual connections between films. The Pizza Planet truck appears in nearly every Pixar movie, sometimes hidden in background scenes. By and large, the megacorporation from Wall-E shows up as logos and references throughout multiple films, including Toy Story 3 and Finding Nemo. Character crossovers provide additional support. Boo from Monsters Incorporated appears as a background character in Brave, suggesting she learned to travel through time using the monster world's door technology. The witch in Brave demonstrates advanced wood-carving skills that seem to defy her time period, leading theorists to believe she is actually Boo as an adult. The theory suggests that animals gradually become more intelligent throughout the timeline, starting with the rats in Ratatouille and progressing to the fully sentient animals in Finding Nemo and A Bug's Life. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence develops through the Toy Story franchise, eventually leading to the robot-dominated world of Wall-E. Energy plays a crucial role in connecting these films. Monsters Incorporated harvests human emotions for power, while The Incredibles shows humans with supernatural abilities, and Cars depicts a world where machines have gained consciousness. These elements supposedly represent different stages in the same universe's technological and evolutionary development. The timeline concludes with humans returning to Earth in Wall-E, but the theory extends even further, suggesting that the monsters in Monsters Incorporated are actually evolved animals from the far future, who learn to time travel back to harvest human energy, creating a loop that connects the end of the timeline back to its middle. The Shining Kubrick moon landing theory from Stanley Kubrick's 1980 horror film, The Shining. This theory suggests that director Stanley Kubrick secretly filmed the fake Apollo moon landing footage for the United States government, and later embedded clues and confessions about this conspiracy throughout The Shining. The film follows Jack Torrance, a writer who becomes the winter caretaker of the isolated Overlook Hotel, with his wife and psychic son, gradually descending into madness. Supporters of this theory point to numerous visual elements as evidence. Danny Torrance wears an Apollo 11 sweater in several scenes, directly referencing the 1969 moon landing mission. The infamous room number is changed from 217 in Stephen King's original novel to 237 in Kubrick's adaptation. Theorists claim this references the distance from Earth to the moon, which is approximately 237,000 miles. The hexagonal carpet patterns in the Colorado Lounge supposedly resemble the launch pad structures at Kennedy Space Center. The impossible window in manager Stuart Ullman's office creates an architectural contradiction that theorists interpret as Kubrick's way of showing that not everything we see on screen represents reality. Dark Side of the Moon, syncing with The Wizard of Oz. This theory claims that Pink Floyd's 1973 album, The Dark Side of the Moon, was specifically designed to sync up with the 1939 film, The Wizard of Oz, when played simultaneously. The Wizard of Oz follows Dorothy as she's transported from Kansas to the magical land of Oz, where she meets colorful characters and seeks a way home. The theory suggests that if you start the album at the third roar of the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer lion at the beginning of the film, the music will align with specific visual moments throughout the movie. Supporters of this theory point to numerous synchronicities. The song transitions from Speak to Me to Breathe coincide with the appearance of the film's title. The line, balanced on the biggest wave, plays as Dorothy balances on a fence. The cash register sounds and money occur when the Wicked Witch of the West appears. The phrase black and blue in Us and Them plays during a scene featuring those exact colors. The transition to the Great Gig in the Sky happens right as the tornado sequence begins. The album's total runtime requires it to be played approximately 2 to 3 times to cover the film's length, and proponents claim meaningful synchronicities continue throughout multiple loops. Pink Floyd members, particularly drummer Nick Mason and guitarist David Gilmour, have repeatedly denied any intentional connection. They've stated it's purely coincidental, and that the band was not thinking about The Wizard of Oz during the album's creation. Despite these denials, the theory gained significant popularity in the 1990s, and remains one of the most well-known examples of perceived synchronicity between music and film. Finding Nemo is about the 5 stages of grief. This theory applies to the 2003 Pixar film about a clownfish father searching the ocean for his captured son. The movie opens with tragedy. Marlin loses his wife Coral and nearly all of their unborn children to a barracuda attack. Only one egg survives, which becomes Nemo. Years later, when Nemo is taken by divers, Marlin's journey to find him mirrors the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Denial comes immediately after Nemo disappears. Marlin refuses to believe his son is truly gone and insists he can find him, despite the vastness of the ocean and the seeming impossibility of the task. Anger manifests in Marlin's interactions with Dory. He snaps at her repeatedly, frustrated by her memory problems and the obstacles they face. His rage surfaces especially when things go wrong, or when others question his mission. Bargaining appears when Marlin makes promises and deals throughout the journey. He tells himself that if he can just reach Sydney, if he can just get past this next obstacle, everything will be okay. He negotiates with sea turtles, whales, and even himself to keep moving forward. Depression hits hardest when Marlin believes Nemo is dead after hearing false information. He gives up, ready to return home alone. The weight of loss crushes him completely in this moment. Acceptance arrives at the end when Marlin finally lets Nemo go during the net scene. He trusts his son's abilities and allows him independence, accepting both past loss and present reality. The journey was never just about finding Nemo. It was about Marlin processing his trauma and learning to live again after devastating loss. Cobb's wedding ring is his totem, from the movie Inception. In Inception, characters use personal totems to determine whether they are in a dream or reality. Cobb, the main character played by Leonardo DiCaprio, appears to use a spinning top that belonged to his deceased wife, Mal. The film famously ends with the top spinning, leaving the audience uncertain whether Cobb is dreaming or awake. However, many fans believe Cobb's real totem is actually his wedding ring. Throughout the entire film, Cobb wears his wedding ring in every dream sequence, but never wears it in reality. This pattern holds consistent across the movie. In the opening dream with Saito, Cobb wears the ring. During the various layers of the heist on Fisher, he wears it. In Limbo with Mal, he wears it. But in every scene that takes place in the real world, including the airport, the airplane, and the final scene with his children, the ring is absent from his finger. This suggests Cobb knows the spinning top is compromised since it originally belonged to Mal, and she knew its behavior. The ring becomes his true indicator. He wore it when she was alive and in their shared dreams, but removed it after her death in the real world. The final scene shows Cobb without his wedding ring, indicating he has actually returned to reality, regardless of whether the top falls or continues spinning. The briefcase contains Marsellus Wallace's soul, from Pulp Fiction. In Quentin Tarantino's 1994 crime film, hitmen Vincent and Jules retrieve a mysterious glowing briefcase for their boss, Marsellus Wallace. The contents are never revealed, but characters react with awe when they see inside. This theory claims the briefcase literally contains Marsellus Wallace's soul. The main evidence centers on the bandage on the back of Marsellus Wallace's neck throughout the film. According to some folklore traditions, the devil extracts souls through the back of the neck. The briefcase's lock combination is 666, a clear biblical reference to the number of the beast. When characters open the briefcase, it emits a golden glow and leaves them mesmerized. This supernatural quality suggests something beyond material wealth. Vincent handles the briefcase with extreme care and reverence, treating it as sacred rather than simply valuable. The theory ties into the film's redemption arc for Jules, who experiences what he believes is divine intervention when bullets miraculously miss him and Vincent. After this moment, Jules decides to leave the criminal life, potentially rejecting the same dark forces that claimed Marsellus Wallace's soul. Tarantino himself has never confirmed what's inside the briefcase, stating it's simply a MacGuffin meant to drive the plot forward. The glowing effect was achieved with a hidden orange light bulb. Despite this, the soul theory remains one of cinema's most persistent fan interpretations. The aliens in Signs are demons, from the 2002 film Signs. Signs follows Graham Hess, a former Episcopal priest who has lost his faith after his wife's death. When hostile creatures begin invading Earth, Graham and his family barricade themselves in their farmhouse. The film ends with Graham regaining his faith after realizing his wife's dying words were a divine message that helps them defeat the creatures. The theory argues these invaders are not extraterrestrial beings, but demons in a spiritual battle. The evidence supporting this interpretation is extensive. First, the creatures are repelled and burned by water. For advanced aliens capable of interstellar travel, invading a planet covered 70% in water makes no tactical sense. However, if the water represents holy water or blessed water, their weakness becomes logical within a spiritual framework. Graham's daughter Bo leaves glasses of water throughout the house, claiming each one is contaminated. The theory suggests her innocent, pure nature inadvertently blesses this water, creating a defense against the demonic entities. When the creatures finally break into the home, it is this water that burns and repels them. The creatures specifically avoid the Hess household for most of the invasion. Graham is a former man of faith, and his home may retain spiritual protection despite his crisis of belief. They only attack when they sense his faith is at its weakest point. The climactic confrontation occurs in the moment Graham rediscovers his faith. His wife's final words, which seemed random, form a perfect instruction to defeat the creature. This divine intervention timing suggests supernatural design rather than coincidence. The invaders display behavior inconsistent with intelligent spacefaring beings. They arrive without protective suits, weapons, or technology, despite humanity possessing the means to harm them. They attempt to break through wooden doors with their bare hands. This primitive approach aligns more with supernatural entities than advanced aliens. M. Night Shyamalan has confirmed the film's central theme explores faith, miracles, and divine providence. The entire narrative structure builds towards spiritual redemption rather than science fiction conflict. Every element that seems illogical for an alien invasion makes complete sense as a test of faith against demonic forces. Jesus was an engineer in Prometheus. This theory comes from Ridley Scott's 2012 science fiction film Prometheus, a prequel to the Alien franchise. In Prometheus, humanity discovers that an ancient alien race called the Engineers created human life on Earth. The film reveals that the Engineers later turned against humanity and were planning to wipe out their creation using biological weapons stored on a distant moon. The theory suggests that Jesus Christ was actually one of these engineers, sent to Earth as an emissary to guide humanity. According to this idea, when humans executed Jesus roughly 2,000 years ago, the engineers viewed this as the final betrayal and decided humanity needed to be destroyed. Director Ridley Scott himself provided the basis for this theory in multiple interviews. He stated that the engineers were planning to send their weapon to Earth approximately 2,000 years before the events of the film. Scott explicitly mentioned that something humanity did around that time angered the engineers enough to warrant total extinction. In one interview, Scott suggested the engineers may have sent a representative to Earth who was rejected and killed by humans. The timeline matches exactly with the crucifixion of Jesus. Scott stopped short of directly naming Jesus in the theatrical cut, but the implication in his comments was clear. The film shows that the engineer installation on LV-223 was actively preparing its deadly cargo for deployment to Earth before an accident stopped them. The dating of this facility corresponds with the time period of Jesus' life and death on Earth. Aladdin is the post-apocalyptic future. This theory comes from Disney's 1992 animated film, Aladdin. The theory suggests that the story does not take place in the distant past, but rather thousands of years into Earth's future, after civilization has collapsed and rebuilt itself. The magical world of Agrabah is actually what remains after humanity destroyed itself and forgot its own history. The primary evidence comes from the genie himself. When Aladdin frees him from the lamp, the genie mentions he has been trapped for 10,000 years. Despite this massive time gap, the genie makes numerous references to modern 20th century culture. He impersonates celebrities, references game shows, and creates objects that would not exist in ancient Arabia. He transforms into a tailor and mentions a 2-for-1 sale at a retail outlet. He does impressions of Jack Nicholson, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and other actors. The theory explains this by proposing that the genie was actually imprisoned around our present day, or slightly into our future. The 10,000 years he mentions would place the events of Aladdin in the year 12,000 or beyond. In this timeline, human civilization collapsed sometime after the genie's imprisonment. Over the following millennia, survivors rebuilt society from scratch, losing most knowledge of the previous world. The magical items in the film support this interpretation. The theory suggests that objects like the magic carpet and the lamp itself are not supernatural, but rather examples of advanced technology that survivors no longer understand. After 10,000 years, scientific devices would appear indistinguishable from magic to people who lost all technical knowledge. The Cave of Wonders could be an ancient bunker or facility from the pre-collapse civilization, designed to protect valuable technology. Its security system, which only allows a diamond in the rough to enter, might be an artificial intelligence programmed to scan for specific genetic markers or personality traits. Willy Wonka is a killer. This theory comes from the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The story follows young Charlie Bucket and 4 other children who win golden tickets to tour the mysterious chocolate factory owned by the reclusive Willy Wonka. Throughout the tour, each child except Charlie meets a terrible fate tied directly to their worst character flaw. The theory suggests these accidents were not accidents at all, but carefully orchestrated eliminations. The evidence begins with Wonka's complete lack of concern when children are hurt. Augustus Gloop gets sucked up a pipe after falling in the chocolate river. Wonka barely reacts, instead calmly stating the boy will be fine while the Oompa Loompas immediately launch into a prepared musical number about gluttony. Violet Beauregard turns into a giant blueberry after chewing experimental gum despite Wonka's warning. Again, no real alarm from Wonka. Just another song from the Oompa Loompas about the dangers of chewing gum, suggesting they knew exactly what would happen. Veruca Salt gets attacked by squirrels and sent down a garbage chute that leads to an incinerator. Mike Teavee gets shrunk down to miniature size. In every case, the Oompa Loompas have perfectly choreographed songs ready to go, as if they rehearsed for these specific scenarios. The factory itself seems designed as a death trap. The chocolate room has no safety railings. The inventing room contains untested products. The television chocolate room uses a dangerous shrinking ray. Wonka also makes every parent sign a contract before entry, potentially absolving him of legal responsibility for whatever happens to their children. The theory concludes that Wonka deliberately set up the tour to eliminate unworthy children, keeping only the pure-hearted Charlie as his chosen heir. Boba Fett killed Owen and Beru from Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. In the original Star Wars film, Luke Skywalker returns to his home on Tatooine to find his Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru have been murdered. Their bodies are shown as charred skeletons outside their burning moisture farm. The Empire is searching for the droids carrying the Death Star plans, and Imperial stormtroopers are blamed for the attack. The theory suggests that Boba Fett, not regular stormtroopers, carried out the execution of Owen and Beru Lars. The evidence centers on several factors. First, Boba Fett was already working for the Empire during this time period, as established in later films and extended material. His reputation as the galaxy's most feared bounty hunter means he would have been an ideal candidate for tracking operations on Tatooine. Second, the precision of the attack stands out. The Lars homestead was specifically targeted while other moisture farms in the area were left untouched. This suggests someone with advanced tracking abilities found exactly what they were looking for, rather than stormtroopers conducting a broad search. Third, the level of destruction seems excessive for a simple interrogation. The complete incineration of the bodies and the methodical burning of the homestead indicates a professional eliminating evidence, which aligns with Boba Fett's known methods. The theory gained traction because it explains why this particular family was singled out when the droids had already left their possession. Kevin McCallister became Jigsaw. This theory connects the young protagonist from Home Alone to the serial killer from the Saw franchise. In Home Alone, 8-year-old Kevin McCallister defends his house from 2 burglars using elaborate traps and mechanisms. In Saw, the villain known as Jigsaw captures people and places them in deadly contraptions designed to test their will to live. The theory suggests that Kevin's childhood experiences turned him into Jigsaw. At age 8, Kevin was abandoned by his family during Christmas and forced to violently defend himself against adult criminals. He created paint can pendulums, blowtorches triggered by doorknobs, nail-covered stairs, and irons that fall from heights. The burglars suffered severe head trauma, burns, and puncture wounds from his traps. The psychological impact of this experience forms the theory's foundation. Kevin was left alone during a formative period and responded by hurting people, even enjoying their pain at times. The movie shows him watching the burglars suffer and occasionally smiling. He experienced no consequences for his actions and was instead praised as a hero. The timeline supports the theory. Kevin was born in 1982, making him 22 when the first Saw film takes place in 2004. Jigsaw's true identity is John Kramer, but the theory suggests Kevin either became a copycat or that the Saw universe exists as Kevin's adult life. Both characters share a methodical approach to trap design and a belief that their victims deserve punishment. Both see themselves as teachers rather than murderers. The traps in both franchises require engineering knowledge and careful planning to execute. Drag Me to Hell represents Christine's eating disorder. This theory comes from the 2009 Sam Raimi horror film Drag Me to Hell. In the movie, Christine Brown works as a loan officer who denies an elderly woman named Sylvia Gainosh an extension on her mortgage. The old woman attacks Christine in her car and places a curse on her. For 3 days, Christine is tormented by a demon called the Lamia, before being dragged to hell at the film's end. This theory suggests the entire film serves as a metaphor for Christine struggling with an eating disorder. The evidence starts with Christine's boyfriend Clay mentioning early in the film that Christine used to be much heavier in college, establishing that she has a history with weight and body image. The curse itself centers around Christine's mouth. Mrs. Ganush removes her dentures and gums Christine's chin during their fight. Later, she vomits into Christine's mouth during a seance. The demon repeatedly forces objects into Christine's mouth throughout the film. Food appears as a recurring source of anxiety and horror. Christine hallucinates a fly in her food at a restaurant. She's force-fed cake at a gathering. The film features multiple scenes of violent vomiting and purging, with substances erupting from Christine's mouth. Mrs. Ganush herself embodies grotesque consumption. She's shown eating messily and without shame. She literally feeds on Christine by cursing her. The old woman represents everything Christine fears about her own relationship with food and her body. Christine's physical deterioration mirrors the toll of an eating disorder. She becomes increasingly gaunt and exhausted. Her desperate attempts to break the curse parallel someone trying to break free from disordered eating patterns but feeling trapped in the cycle. The film's title takes on new meaning under this reading. Being dragged to hell represents the inescapable nature of the disorder consuming her completely. Sandy is dead in Greece. This theory suggests that Sandy Olsen actually drowned during her summer romance with Danny Zuko, and the entire movie takes place in the afterlife, or as Danny's guilt-ridden fantasy. In Greece, Sandy unexpectedly shows up at Rydell High School after having a summer fling with Danny at the beach. The two reconnect and eventually end up together, with the film culminating in their flying car ascending into the sky. The theory centers on the opening beach flashback where Danny and Sandy's romance began. Supporters argue that Sandy drowned during this summer, and what follows is either her journey through the afterlife or Danny's psychological processing of her death. Several pieces of evidence support this interpretation. The flying car at the end represents Sandy's ascension to heaven, finally at peace. Danny's dramatic personality shift from the confident beach Romeo to the insecure school Danny reflects his guilt and trauma over Sandy's death. The musical numbers throughout the film take on a surreal, dreamlike quality that feels disconnected from reality. Sandy's complete personality transformation at the end, abandoning her wholesome image for leather and cigarettes, represents her letting go of earthly moral constraints. The beach setting holds particular significance as both the beginning and symbolic end of their story. Water imagery appears throughout the film, from the beach memories to various song lyrics referencing drowning and flowing. The seemingly impossible coincidence of Sandy transferring to Danny's exact school and their fairy tale reunion feels too convenient for reality. The overall tone shifts from realistic high school drama to increasingly fantastical musical sequences. Sandy's final transformation happens literally overnight, suggesting a supernatural rather than natural character development. The other characters accept these dramatic changes without question, as if operating within a dream logic rather than realistic social dynamics. Frozen was made to hide Walt's frozen head search results. This theory comes from Disney's 2013 animated film Frozen. For decades, a persistent urban legend claimed that Walt Disney had his body cryogenically preserved after his passing in 1966. The rumor suggested he wanted to be frozen and revived in the future, when medical technology could cure him. While this has been thoroughly debunked and Walt was actually cremated, the conspiracy theory lived on in popular culture and internet searches. The theory suggests that Disney deliberately chose the title Frozen and pushed massive marketing for the film to bury search results about Walt Disney's supposed cryogenic preservation. Before the movie's release, searching terms like Disney Frozen or Walt Disney Frozen would bring up articles and forum discussions about the conspiracy theory. After Frozen became a global phenomenon in 2013 and 2014, those same searches now primarily return results about the animated movie, its sequels, merchandise, and related content. Supporters of this theory point to the timing and the seemingly generic title. Frozen is a simple, one-word title that directly matches common search terms people would use when looking into the Walt Disney freezing conspiracy. The movie's unprecedented success, massive marketing campaign, and cultural saturation effectively dominated those search terms. Some theorists note that Disney could have chosen many other titles for the film, as the original fairy tale it was based on is called The Snow Queen. The counter-argument is that Frozen is simply a fitting title for a movie about ice, snow, and a character with freezing powers, and that its success was organic rather than a calculated search engine optimization strategy. Robocop is Jesus from the 1987 film Robocop. This theory suggests that Officer Alex Murphy's transformation into Robocop serves as a direct Christ allegory. Murphy is a Detroit police officer who gets brutally killed by criminals, only to be resurrected as a cyborg law enforcer who cleanses the city of corruption and violence. The evidence for this interpretation starts with Murphy's death scene. He is gunned down by Clarence Boddicker's gang in an abandoned factory, with his arms spread out in a pose that mirrors crucifixion imagery. The scene is deliberately drawn out and brutal, emphasizing the sacrifice. Murphy's resurrection happens at Omni Consumer Products, where scientists rebuild him as Robocop. This mirrors Christ's death and resurrection after 3 days, though the timeline differs. Robocop emerges as something both human and more than human, just as Christ was both man and divine. Throughout the film, Robocop saves innocents and punishes the wicked. He literally walks on water in one scene when he steps through a flooded area. His mission involves cleansing Detroit of corporate greed and criminal violence, similar to Christ cleansing the temple of money changers. Director Paul Verhoeven, who studied theology before becoming a filmmaker, confirmed he deliberately included religious symbolism in Robocop. He's known for exploring religious themes in multiple films throughout his career. The Catholic imagery isn't subtle once you know to look for it, from the death and rebirth structure to the redemption arc that defines Murphy's journey back to his humanity. The Sonic movie redesign was a public stunt. This theory comes from the 2019 Sonic the Hedgehog film. In April 2019, Paramount released the first trailer for the Sonic movie. The design of Sonic was immediately panned by audiences and fans. The character had disturbingly realistic human-like teeth, small eyes, an oddly muscular body, and proportions that felt wrong. The backlash was instant and severe across social media. Just 3 days after the trailer dropped, director Jeff Fowler announced on Twitter that Sonic would be redesigned. The film was delayed from November 2019 to February 2020 to allow time for the changes. When the new design appeared, it was vastly better received. Sonic now had larger eyes, no realistic teeth, and proportions closer to his video game appearance. This theory claims the terrible original design was never meant to be the final version. Instead, Paramount deliberately released an ugly Sonic to generate massive publicity. The plan was to then reveal the real design and be praised for listening to fans, creating goodwill and even more attention for the film. The evidence supporting this includes how quickly the redesign happened. Fully redesigning and reanimating a computer-generated character in every scene normally takes far longer than 7 months. The original design also seemed almost deliberately bad, as if it was made to be hated. The publicity stunt worked perfectly if true. The story dominated entertainment news for months, and painted Paramount as a studio that listens to its audience. However, visual effects artists from the studio MPC have stated they genuinely worked intensive overtime to complete the redesign. The cost of creating 2 full character models and animating the film twice would be enormous, making this an expensive gamble even as a marketing strategy. Han is Force-sensitive from Star Wars. This theory suggests that Han Solo possesses latent Force abilities throughout the original trilogy, even though he openly mocks the concept and shows no awareness of any connection to the Force. Han demonstrates an unusual level of luck and intuition that seems to go beyond simple coincidence. His piloting skills with the Millennium Falcon border on supernatural, successfully navigating asteroid fields that protocol droids calculate as having impossible odds of survival. He makes hyperspace jumps with split-second timing that would require incredible spatial awareness and reflexes. His marksmanship stands out as remarkably precise under pressure. During the rescue on the Death Star and throughout the trilogy, Han makes shots in chaotic situations that would require exceptional instinct and timing. His ability to sense danger and react before threats fully materialize appears throughout all 3 films. The theory points to Han's survival rate as evidence. He consistently escapes situations that should be fatal, from Imperial entanglements to the freezing process on Bespin. His timing when arriving to save Luke during the Death Star trench run seems impossibly perfect, as if guided by something beyond conscious decision-making. Supporters of this theory note that Force sensitivity exists on a spectrum. Not every Force-sensitive individual becomes a Jedi or even recognizes their abilities. Han could possess just enough connection to the Force to enhance his natural abilities without ever understanding the source. This would explain his skepticism about the Force, while simultaneously benefiting from it throughout his adventures. The theory also draws connections to his son Ben, who becomes Kylo Ren. Strong Force sensitivity in Ben could have been inherited from both parents rather than solely from Leia. Stan Lee is Uatu the Watcher. This theory spans across the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. Stan Lee appeared in cameo roles throughout nearly every Marvel film from 2008 to 2019. The theory suggests these aren't random appearances, but rather the same cosmic being, observing key events across different times and locations. The biggest piece of evidence comes from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. In a scene set in space, Stan Lee appears wearing a spacesuit while talking to a group of Watchers, cosmic beings whose purpose is to observe and record events throughout the universe without interfering. He tells them about his time as a delivery man, which directly references his cameo in Captain America: Civil War. This confirms his cameos are connected and that he has some relationship with the Watchers. James Gunn, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, stated in interviews that this scene was meant to imply Stan Lee is playing the same character in all his Marvel appearances. He works with or for the Watchers, traveling to different points in time and space to observe major events. Additional evidence includes the variety of his appearances. Stan Lee shows up as a World War II veteran, a spaceship pilot, a man in modern-day New York, and even on alien planets. No normal human could be present at all these locations and time periods. The only explanation is that he exists outside normal space and time. His non-interference also matches Watcher behavior. In every cameo, Stan Lee observes the heroes but never directly helps them or changes outcomes. He remains a bystander, consistent with the Watcher code. Andy's mom owned Jessie. This theory comes from Toy Story 2 and suggests that Andy's mother is actually Emily, the little girl who originally owned Jessie the cowgirl doll. In Toy Story 2, Jessie shares her tragic backstory through the song When She Loved Me. The flashback shows a young girl named Emily playing with Jessie throughout her childhood. As Emily grows into a teenager, she loses interest in her toys and eventually donates Jessie to charity. Jessie describes this abandonment as one of the most painful experiences of her life. The theory connects several pieces of evidence. First, Andy wears a distinctive red cowboy hat with a white lace trim throughout the first movie. This hat looks remarkably similar to the hat that Emily wears in Jessie's flashback sequences. The hat is never explained, and Andy doesn't own any other cowboy-themed toys from that era, which makes its presence notable. Second, the timeline matches up. Emily appears to be a child in the 1960s or 70s, based on the clothing, hairstyles, and bedroom decor shown in the flashback. Andy's mom would be the right age to have been a child during that time period. Third, Andy somehow ended up with Jessie's companion Woody, a rare and valuable toy from the same Woody's Roundup collection. The theory suggests Andy's mom kept Woody because he reminded her of happier times, even after she gave away or lost the rest of her childhood toys. Finally, the entire Toy Story series explores themes of toys being passed down and the bittersweet nature of children growing up. Having Andy's mom be Emily would create a powerful full-circle moment where the woman who once abandoned her toys now watches her own son form the same deep bonds with his toys. Bruce Campbell is Mysterio from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Actor Bruce Campbell appears in all three of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, playing seemingly different characters. In the first film, he's the wrestling ring announcer who gives Peter Parker the name Spider-Man. In the second film, he plays a snooty theater usher who refuses to let Peter enter because he's late. In the third film, he's a French waiter at the restaurant where Peter plans to propose to Mary Jane. The theory proposes that all three of these characters are actually the same person. Quentin Beck, who in the comics becomes the villain Mysterio. Beck is a special effects artist and master of disguise, making it entirely plausible that he could appear as different people throughout the trilogy. The evidence starts with director Sam Raimi himself. He confirmed in interviews that he intended to use Mysterio as the villain in a potential Spider-Man 4, with Bruce Campbell set to play him. This adds weight to the idea that Campbell's cameos were building toward this reveal. Each of Campbell's characters shows an unusual awareness of Peter Parker specifically. The ring announcer directly names him Spider-Man. The usher goes out of his way to humiliate Peter in front of Mary Jane. The waiter torments Peter during a critical moment in his relationship. These aren't random interactions. They feel targeted and personal. The theatrical and performative nature of all three characters also fits Mysterio perfectly. In the comics, Beck is a failed actor and showman who craves attention and recognition. Each cameo shows Campbell hamming it up, playing to an audience, and putting on an elaborate performance. The timeline works as well. If Beck encountered Spider-Man at the wrestling match, it would give him motivation to study and eventually target the hero, building up to the villain reveal that never happened due to Spider-Man 4's cancellation. Owen Grady is the kid from Jurassic Park 1. This theory suggests that Chris Pratt's character Owen from Jurassic World is actually one of the children from the original film, either Tim or Lex Murphy. The theory points to several pieces of circumstantial evidence. Owen demonstrates an unusually deep understanding of dinosaur behavior that goes beyond typical animal training. His comfort level around the creatures and intuitive grasp of how they think could stem from his traumatic childhood experiences on Isla Nublar. Owen's age lines up relatively well with the timeline. The original Jurassic Park takes place in 1993, and Jurassic World occurs in 2015, a gap of 22 years. Tim Murphy was around 11 or 12 in the first film, which would make him in his early to mid-30s during Jurassic World. Owen appears to be in this age range. Some fans note that Owen's protectiveness over the park's visitors and his distrust of corporate decisions mirrors the trauma Tim and Lex experienced. He consistently advocates for respecting the dinosaurs rather than exploiting them, which aligns with lessons learned from surviving the original park's collapse. The theory falls apart under scrutiny, however. The characters have different last names, Murphy versus Grady. Neither Tim nor Lex are ever mentioned as having changed identities or gone into dinosaur behavioral research. The film's promotional materials and official sources confirm Owen as an entirely separate character, with his own distinct backstory as a Navy veteran. Peter Parker was in Iron Man 2. This theory suggests that the young boy in the Iron Man mask who gets saved by Tony Stark at the Stark Expo is actually a young Peter Parker, years before he becomes Spider-Man. In Iron Man 2, during the climactic battle at the Stark Expo, Justin Hammer's drones attack the fairgrounds. A young boy wearing an Iron Man mask stands his ground when one of the drones targets him. Before the drone can fire, Tony Stark in the Mark VI armor swoops in and destroys the robot, saving the child's life. The evidence supporting this theory centers on the timeline and location. Iron Man 2 takes place in 2010. Peter Parker is established as 15 years old in Captain America: Civil War, which takes place in 2016. This would make Peter around 9 or 10 years old during the events of Iron Man 2, matching the approximate age of the boy at the Stark Expo. The Stark Expo takes place in Queens, New York, which is also Peter Parker's home borough. This geographic match adds credibility to the theory. The boy's bravery in standing up to the drone, even as a child, reflects the courage Peter would later show as Spider-Man. The Iron Man mask also demonstrates an early admiration for Tony Stark, which perfectly aligns with Peter's hero worship of Stark throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Tom Holland, who plays Spider-Man, has confirmed he considers this backstory as part of his character's history. Director Jon Favreau has also acknowledged the theory positively, giving it a degree of official recognition within the broader Marvel continuity. Rick Deckard is a replicant. This theory comes from the 1982 science fiction film Blade Runner. In Blade Runner, Harrison Ford plays Rick Deckard, a former police officer called a Blade Runner, whose job is to hunt down and retire artificial humans called replicants. The film follows Deckard as he's pulled back into service to track down a group of rogue replicants who have escaped to Earth. The entire story revolves around the question of what makes someone human, and whether replicants with implanted memories can truly be considered alive. The theory suggests that Deckard himself is actually a replicant, making his hunt for his own kind deeply ironic. The strongest piece of evidence comes from a recurring dream sequence where Deckard imagines a unicorn running through a forest. Near the end of the film, another Blade Runner named Gaff leaves an origami unicorn at Deckard's apartment. This suggests Gaff knows about Deckard's private dreams, which would only be possible if those dreams were implanted memories that Gaff had access to. Director Ridley Scott has openly confirmed this theory in multiple interviews, stating he always intended for Deckard to be a replicant. The director's cut and final cut versions of the film include the unicorn dream sequence, which was absent from the theatrical release, making the theory more explicit. Additional evidence includes a scene where Deckard's eyes briefly glow with the same reflective shine that identifies other replicants throughout the film. During his fight with the replicant Prees, Deckard displays unusual strength and durability that seems beyond normal human capability. The film also emphasizes how replicants are given photographs and false memories to make them believe they're human. Deckard keeps old photographs in his apartment, mirroring the behavior of Rachel, a replicant who doesn't know what she is until Deckard reveals the truth to her. Jack Dawson is a time traveler from the movie Titanic. In this 1997 romantic disaster film, Jack is a poor artist who wins a ticket onto the Titanic and falls in love with first-class passenger Rose DeWitt Bukater. The theory suggests Jack isn't actually from 1912, but instead traveled back in time from the modern era. The most cited piece of evidence comes from a line where Jack mentions fishing on Lake Wissota in Wisconsin. The problem is Lake Wissota is a man-made reservoir that wasn't created until 1917, 5 years after the Titanic sank in 1912. Jack describes specific memories of this lake as if he had actually been there, which would be impossible for someone living in 1912. Supporters of the theory point to Jack's unusually modern sensibilities and progressive attitudes about women, class, and art. His encouragement of Rose to pursue her own independence and his dismissal of rigid social structures seem more aligned with contemporary values than those of the early 1900s. His backpack is another detail often mentioned. While backpacks existed in some form, the style Jack carries was not commonly used by civilians in 1912, and more closely resembles military rucksacks or modern hiking packs that became popular decades later. The theory also notes Jack's artistic style and techniques appear more consistent with later artistic movements rather than the prevailing styles of 1912. His loose, expressive approach to drawing Rose feels ahead of its time for a self-taught artist of that era. Finally, the mysterious circumstances of how Jack even got on the ship, winning his ticket in a last-minute poker game, could explain how a time traveler might insert himself into this historical moment without a proper paper trail or background that could be verified. Jurassic Park dinosaurs are not real. This theory comes from the original Jurassic Park film. The theory argues that the creatures in the park are not actually dinosaurs at all, but rather genetically engineered theme park monsters designed to meet visitor expectations. InGen never truly brought back dinosaurs. They created something entirely different. The film itself provides the evidence for this theory. Dr. Henry Wu explicitly states that the DNA extraction process requires filling in sequence gaps with frog DNA. This means every creature in the park is a hybrid, not a pure dinosaur. Wu also mentions that the dinosaurs have been specifically engineered to be viable theme park attractions rather than scientifically accurate recreations. The creatures lack features that real dinosaurs would have possessed, most notably feathers. Many species that lived during the Cretaceous period were covered in plumage, but the park's animals have scaly reptilian skin. This supports the idea that InGen designed them to match public perception rather than paleontological reality. The frog DNA has clear effects on the animals. All specimens are engineered to be female, yet some develop the ability to change sex and breed. This is a direct result of the amphibian DNA splicing. The dinosaurs behave and function based on their mixed genetic code, not as authentic prehistoric animals would have. The theory suggests that calling them dinosaurs is fundamentally misleading. They are designer organisms built from incomplete genetic fragments and modern animal DNA. InGen created convincing imitations of dinosaurs, not the real thing. The narrator and Tyler Durden is Calvin and Hobbes. This theory comes from Fight Club. In Fight Club, an unnamed corporate worker suffering from insomnia and dissatisfaction with modern life creates an alter ego named Tyler Durden. Tyler becomes a charismatic anarchist who helps him start an underground fight club and eventually a terrorist organization. The twist reveals that Tyler has been a figment of the narrator's fractured mind all along. The theory suggests that the narrator is actually Calvin from the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes, now grown into a miserable adult. Tyler Durden represents Hobbes, his childhood imaginary friend who has returned in human form. The evidence starts with the obvious parallel. Both stories center on a protagonist with an imaginary companion that only they can see. In both cases, this companion represents the wild, uninhibited side of the main character's personality. Thematically, the connections run deeper. Calvin constantly rebelled against authority figures, questioned consumer culture, and rejected societal expectations. These same anti-establishment and anti-consumerist themes form the core philosophy of Fight Club. The narrator's corporate job and IKEA obsession could represent what happened when Calvin was forced to conform to the very system he once mocked. Hobbes often encouraged Calvin's most destructive and chaotic impulses, much like Tyler pushes the narrator toward violence and anarchy. Both companions serve as manifestations of repressed desires and rejected aspects of identity. Chuck Palahniuk, the author of Fight Club, has acknowledged this theory in interviews and stated he finds the comparison flattering. While never confirming it as intentional, he has not disputed the interpretation. Ned Ryerson is the devil, from Groundhog Day. In Groundhog Day, weatherman Phil Connors finds himself trapped in a time loop, reliving the same day over and over in the town of Punxsutawney. This theory suggests that Ned Ryerson, the overly enthusiastic insurance salesman Phil encounters, is actually the devil himself, placed there to torment Phil or test him during his supernatural punishment. The evidence starts with timing. Ned appears at the exact moment Phil steps off the curb on the first repeated day, almost as if he materialized specifically to begin Phil's torment. Ned knows an uncomfortable amount about Phil's past, recalling specific details from high school that seem beyond normal memory. He brings up Needle-Nose Ned, Ned the Head, and multiple embarrassing nicknames, demonstrating an almost supernatural level of knowledge. Ned works as an insurance salesman, a profession built around contracts and deals. This mirrors traditional depictions of the devil as a deal-maker who traps people through agreements. The persistence with which Ned pursues Phil to buy insurance reflects demonic temptation, never taking no for an answer despite Phil's clear disinterest and eventual hostility. Throughout the loops, Ned remains cheerfully oblivious to Phil's growing frustration and rage. Even when Phil responds with violence or cruelty, Ned returns the next day completely unchanged, suggesting he exists outside normal human emotion or consequence. His unnaturally positive demeanor in the face of Phil's worst behavior could indicate he's feeding off Phil's suffering or simply monitoring his progress through this purgatorial test. Mary Poppins is on drugs, from the 1964 Disney classic Mary Poppins. This theory suggests that the magical nanny isn't actually magical at all, but rather under the influence of hallucinogenic substances throughout the film, and possibly giving them to the children as well. The evidence starts with Mary's infamous carpet bag, which appears bottomless and produces impossible objects. Theorists point out this resembles the distorted perception of someone experiencing altered consciousness. Her entire arrival via umbrella and departure by floating away mirror the sensation of getting high and coming down. The spoonful of sugar song takes on darker meaning when Mary literally dispenses medicine to the children. She sings about how medicine goes down easier with sugar, which some interpret as a reference to masking the taste of substances. The fact that the children immediately have a fantastical adventure afterward, jumping into a chalk painting and experiencing impossible physics, suggests they've ingested something that altered their perception. The entire chalk painting sequence features melting colors, talking animals, and reality-bending scenarios that closely resemble descriptions of psychedelic experiences. The penguin waiters, the carousel horses that break free, and the general dreamlike quality all point toward hallucination rather than magic. Uncle Albert's laughing gas scene shows characters literally getting high and floating to the ceiling while unable to control their laughter. The tea party suspended in mid-air plays out exactly like a trip sequence. The Banks children go from rigid, unhappy kids to seeing magical adventures everywhere after Mary arrives with her special medicine and sugar. Star Wars is a story told from R2-D2's perspective, from the original Star Wars trilogy and prequel films. This theory suggests that the entire saga we watch is actually being narrated or recounted by the astromech droid R2-D2 at some point after the events conclude. The little droid serves as the historian of the Skywalker family story. The evidence supporting this theory is substantial. R2-D2 appears in every main Star Wars film and is present at nearly every major event across the saga. He witnesses Anakin's childhood on Tatooine, serves in the Clone Wars, watches Anakin's fall to the dark side, escorts Padme during her final days, delivers the Death Star plans to the Rebellion, and participates in all three major battles against the Empire. Unlike C-3PO, who has his memory wiped at the end of Revenge of the Sith, R2-D2 retains all of his memories intact. He carries a complete record of everything that happened across multiple decades. As an astromech droid, R2 also has recording capabilities and stores vast amounts of data within his systems. The theory connects to George Lucas's original concept for Star Wars. Early drafts reference the Journal of the Wills, an ancient text that recorded galactic history. Lucas once described the films as being recounted by a keeper of this journal 100 years after the events took place. R2-D2 emerges as the perfect candidate for this role. He's the only character who survives the entire saga with his memories and knowledge completely intact, positioning him as the ultimate keeper of the Skywalker story. Chuck Noland is stuck in a reality show from the movie Cast Away. In Cast Away, Tom Hanks plays Chuck Noland, a FedEx employee who survives a plane crash and spends years stranded on a deserted island before eventually being rescued and returning to civilization. This theory suggests that Chuck was never actually stranded at all, and that his entire island experience was manufactured as an elaborate reality television show. The evidence starts with the FedEx packages. Multiple packages wash ashore containing perfectly convenient items for survival and entertainment, including ice skates that become tools and a volleyball that becomes his companion Wilson. The timing and content seem almost too perfect for someone genuinely stranded in a random location. The island itself raises questions. Despite being remote enough that Chuck cannot escape, it provides just enough resources to keep him alive. Fresh water, coconuts, and fish are all accessible. The cave shelter is conveniently located. Everything needed for a compelling survival story is present, but nothing that would make escape easy. Chuck's rescue happens at a suspiciously dramatic moment. After years on the island, he builds a raft and ventures into the ocean at exactly the right time to be spotted by a passing cargo ship. The timing feels orchestrated rather than lucky. FedEx receives massive publicity from the film. Their branding appears prominently throughout, and the story showcases their dedication through Chuck's character. A reality show would explain this product placement on a much deeper level. When Chuck returns home, his reintegration into society happens remarkably smoothly for someone who experienced such extreme isolation. No extended psychological evaluation or rehabilitation appears on screen. He simply rejoins the world, almost as if he was never truly cut off from it. Humans are insects in Star Wars. This theory comes from the entire Star Wars saga, particularly the original trilogy. The theory proposes that the characters who appear to be human in Star Wars are actually sentient hive insects, similar to bees or termites, rather than actual humans. The argument starts with the opening crawl itself. The films tell us the story takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Real humans evolved on Earth over the last 60 million years. If Star Wars takes place in a completely different galaxy long before our time, these cannot possibly be Earth humans despite their appearance. The theory points to several pieces of evidence. First, the original trilogy features remarkably few female characters. Across 6+ hours of film, only Princess Leia, Mon Mothma, and Aunt Beru appear as significant female humans. This extreme gender imbalance suggests something unusual about the species. Second, almost no one in the films discusses their families or parents. In 6 hours of movies about galactic war, virtually no character mentions their mother, father, or siblings in any meaningful way. This absence of family discussion implies that parenting relationships are much less important to these beings than they are to actual humans. Such weak family bonds would make sense for a species with large brood sizes, short gestation periods, and young ages of maturity. The theory suggests these Star Wars humans are organized like a hive, with a single queen who lays eggs, a handful of fertile males, and a massive population of infertile female workers and soldiers. Force sensitivity in this reading belongs only to the fertile males and females who can reproduce. The theory even proposes that male actors in non-force sensitive roles are actually portraying infertile females, which would explain why the vast majority of soldiers, pilots, and workers appear male. This framework gives new meaning to several elements of the saga. The Empire's obsession with building massive spherical structures like the Death Star mirrors hive-building behavior. The use of clone troopers becomes a logical extension of a species already comfortable with the concept of identical worker drones. The Jedi Order's suppression of family attachments aligns with hive insect social structures, where individual family units matter less than the collective. Michael Myers is a cyborg, a theory from the Halloween franchise. The Halloween series follows the relentless killer Michael Myers as he stalks and eliminates victims across multiple films spanning decades. The theory suggests that Michael is not entirely human, but rather part machine, which would explain his seemingly impossible abilities. The evidence centers on Michael's superhuman durability. Throughout the franchise, he survives gunshots, stabbings, explosions, and falls that would end any normal person. In the original Halloween, Dr. Loomis shoots him 6 times, and he falls from a second-story balcony, only to vanish moments later. In Halloween 2, he walks away after being shot in both eyes and engulfed in flames. Later films show him surviving even more extreme trauma. His mechanical movement patterns support the theory. Michael walks with an unnaturally steady gait, never running but always catching his victims. This robotic precision in his movements suggests programming rather than human impulse. He never speaks, never shows pain, and displays no human reactions to injury. The theory points to his strength as further evidence. Michael lifts grown adults with one hand, pins people to walls with knives, and crushes skulls with his bare hands. These feats exceed normal human capability by a significant margin. Some versions of the theory suggest the Cult of Thorn from Halloween 6 used technology rather than magic to enhance Michael. Others propose that Dr. Loomis or another party converted Michael into a cyborg after the events of the first film, which would explain why his durability increases with each sequel. The theory provides a logical explanation for Michael's abilities without relying on supernatural elements, treating the franchise as science fiction rather than horror. Wall-E is actually Satan from the 2008 Pixar film Wall-E. In the movie, humanity has abandoned Earth and lives aboard the Axiom, a space station where all their needs are met. Wall-E, a waste-collecting robot, discovers a plant and shows it to Eve, a probe sent from the Axiom to find signs of life. This sets off a chain of events that ultimately brings humanity back to the ruined Earth. The theory draws heavy parallels to the biblical story of the Garden of Eden. Wall-E acts as the serpent figure, while Eve shares her name with the first woman. The plant functions as the forbidden fruit, representing knowledge that disrupts an existing paradise. Wall-E directly causes Eve to deviate from her original programming by showing her the plant and forming an attachment with her. The Axiom represents a form of heaven, where humans live in comfort without struggle or hardship. Wall-E's actions lead to humanity's expulsion from this paradise and their return to Earth, where they must now toil and work the soil to survive. This mirrors the punishment given in Genesis after eating the forbidden fruit. Further evidence includes Wall-E's persistent temptation of Eve despite her resistance, his disruption of the established order aboard the Axiom, and the captain's fall from ignorance to knowledge after learning the truth about Earth. The film ends with humanity cast out of their comfortable existence and forced into a harder life of manual labor and agriculture. Beetlejuice is the ghost of Batman. This theory connects Tim Burton's Beetlejuice from 1988 with his Batman film from 1989. The theory suggests that Bruce Wayne died at some point after his time as Batman and became the mischievous bio-exorcist ghost we know as Beetlejuice. Both characters were played by Michael Keaton and directed by Tim Burton, creating a unique overlap in casting and creative vision. The evidence starts with the timeline. Beetlejuice takes place in the afterlife, showing us what happens to people after they pass. The film establishes that ghosts retain aspects of their former personalities, but often become exaggerated versions of themselves. Beetlejuice's chaotic, rule-breaking nature could be seen as Bruce Wayne's rigid control and discipline completely inverting after spending decades or centuries in the afterlife. Both characters share certain traits. They operate outside normal society, wear distinctive dark clothing, and have a theatrical flair for dramatic entrances. Beetlejuice's striped suit mirrors the bold costume design of Batman's outfit. Both characters also use fear and spectacle as tools, though for very different purposes. The theory points to Beetlejuice's surprising competence when he chooses to apply himself. Despite his chaotic behavior, he demonstrates skills in manipulation, strategy, and an understanding of complex supernatural bureaucracy. These abilities align with what a former detective and strategist like Bruce Wayne would retain. Some supporters note that Beetlejuice died by hanging, visible from the marks on his neck, suggesting a dark end that could fit with a Batman who finally succumbed to his dangerous lifestyle or chose to end things on his own terms after losing everything. Bigger Luke. This theory comes from the original Star Wars trilogy. The Bigger Luke theory proposes that there are actually two different Luke Skywalkers in the original films. One Luke is noticeably taller than the other, and they appear to swap in and out throughout the movies. The evidence for this theory comes from apparent height inconsistencies in the original trilogy. Mark Hamill's height seems to change from scene to scene, particularly when standing next to other characters. In some shots, Luke appears roughly the same height as Han Solo. In other scenes, he looks significantly shorter. Fans have compiled side-by-side comparisons showing Luke standing at different heights relative to Princess Leia, with the difference being too substantial to explain through camera angles or footwear alone. The theory gained traction in online communities during the 2010s as fans pored over screenshots and created elaborate charts documenting every appearance of both regular Luke and Bigger Luke. Some believers in the theory suggest Bigger Luke appears more frequently in action sequences and wide shots, while regular Luke handles close-ups and dialogue-heavy scenes. Others claim you can tell them apart by subtle differences in hairstyling or facial features. The more accepted explanation is that these height differences result from basic filmmaking inconsistencies. Different camera angles, platform shoes, apple boxes used for shorter actors, and the general chaos of film production all contribute to continuity errors. The theory has become a beloved joke within the Star Wars fandom, representing the absurd lengths fans will go to explain simple production mistakes. The Last Jedi is about sex, from the Disney Star Wars film. The Last Jedi is the 8th episode in the Star Wars saga, following Rey as she trains with Luke Skywalker while the Resistance battles the First Order. Throughout the film, Rey and villain Kylo Ren share a mysterious Force connection that allows them to communicate across vast distances. This theory argues that director Rian Johnson deliberately filled the film with sexual imagery and tension, breaking from the traditionally chaste nature of Star Wars to tell a story about desire and coming of age from a modern perspective. The most obvious evidence centers on Rey and Kylo's Force connection scenes. These moments are filmed intimately, with close-ups of their faces, isolated environments, and sound design reduced to breathing and echoing voices. Critics compared these scenes to late-night texting sessions or video calls between potential romantic partners. In one sequence, Kylo appears shirtless, a shot clearly designed to appeal to the female gaze. The two even touch hands through the Force connection in a moment presented as deeply sensual. The film contains blatant phallic and vaginal imagery throughout. On the island of Ahch-To, Rey encounters an eternally erect Force tree and a mysterious gushing cavern. Before traveling to the casino planet Canto Bight, Maz Kanata hints that the master codebreaker they seek can do much more than just penetrate enemy spacecraft, using clear innuendo. The color red functions as a substitute for both violence and intimacy throughout the film. Red appears in almost every frame but bursts forth most prominently during the throne room fight scene, where Rey and Kylo battle side by side against crimson-clad guards before crimson walls. After destroying the guards, Kylo tells Rey with brutal affection that she comes from nothing and is nothing, but not to him. The scene functions as a tension-relieving consummation of their movie-long dynamic. Kylo repeatedly uses manipulation tactics associated with toxic modern dating. He negs Rey by telling her the effort of their connection would kill her, and that she comes from nothing. He attempts to control her self-esteem to make her submit to his wishes. The theory frames their dynamic as a deep space booty call, with Rey traveling across the galaxy to meet a man who does not care about her in any meaningful way. Supporters of this theory note that Star Wars has always contained sublimated sexual metaphors, pointing to Luke firing torpedoes into the Death Star trench in the original film. However, The Last Jedi makes these themes explicit rather than sublimated, acknowledging sexuality in ways the franchise traditionally avoided. The film updates these elements for a generation shaped by online dating, drunk texting, and discussions about consent and manipulation in relationships. The theory positions The Last Jedi as a coming-of-age story about Rey wrestling with sexual desire and learning hard lessons about men who use attraction as a tool for manipulation. In this reading, the film explores what growing up means from a modern woman's perspective, making it fundamentally about navigating desire, power, and self-worth in romantic and intimate contexts. The Dark Knight Trilogy is retelling the Book of Job. This theory applies to Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy spanning from 2006 to 2012. In the biblical Book of Job, a righteous man faces endless suffering as a test of his faith and moral character. He loses his wealth, his family, his health, and his reputation, yet refuses to abandon his principles. The Dark Knight Trilogy follows this same structure with Bruce Wayne as the job figure. Throughout the three films, Bruce loses nearly everything. He watches his parents die, sees his childhood home burn to the ground, and gets rejected by Rachel Dawes in the first film. The Dark Knight strips away even more. Rachel dies in an explosion, Harvey Dent becomes corrupted, and Batman takes the blame for murders he didn't commit, becoming a wanted fugitive. The Dark Knight Rises continues the pattern. Bane breaks Bruce's back and throws him in a prison pit. His fortune gets stolen. Gotham turns against the memory of Batman. He's left with nothing, trapped in a hole in the ground, forced to climb out through sheer will. The Joker and Bane function as Satan figures, deliberately testing Batman's moral code. The Joker tries to prove that anyone will break under enough pressure. Bane wants to crush Bruce's spirit entirely. Both villains specifically target Bruce's hope and his refusal to kill. Despite losing everything multiple times, Batman never breaks his one rule. Like Job, he maintains his moral code through unbearable suffering. And like Job, he receives restoration at the end, finding peace and a new life away from Gotham. The Angry Birds movie is right-wing propaganda. This theory suggests that the 2016 animated film, based on the popular mobile game, contains deliberate political messaging that aligns with conservative and anti-immigration viewpoints. The movie follows Red, a bird with anger management issues living on a peaceful island, populated entirely by flightless birds. When a boat full of green pigs arrives claiming to be friendly explorers, most birds welcome them with open arms. However, Red remains suspicious of these outsiders and their true intentions. Supporters of this theory point to several key elements as evidence. The pigs arrive from outside the bird's homeland and immediately begin integrating into their society while claiming peaceful intentions. The bird's leader enthusiastically embraces multiculturalism and encourages everyone to welcome their new neighbors without question. Red serves as the lone voice warning about potential dangers, but the other birds dismiss him as paranoid and intolerant. This mirrors contemporary political discourse, where those expressing concern about immigration are often labeled as fearmongers. The pigs ultimately reveal their true purpose by stealing all the birds' eggs, representing the next generation. This act of taking the birds' children serves as the catalyst for the birds to finally take action. The film's climax involves the birds launching a military-style assault to reclaim their stolen offspring and drive out the invaders. Proponents argue that the movie's message centers around protecting one's homeland and children from outsiders who may not have benevolent intentions. They point to Red's transformation from social outcast to hero as validation that being suspicious of newcomers can be justified. The timing of the film's release during the 2016 election cycle and rising immigration debates adds weight to this interpretation for some viewers. The real Journal of the Whills. This theory comes from Star Wars and suggests that the entire saga is being recorded and narrated by ancient cosmic beings known as the Whills. In the Star Wars universe, the Journal of the Whills was George Lucas's original framing device for the entire story. The theory proposes that what we're watching isn't just a space opera, but rather a historical record being kept by these mystical entities. The Whills would be documenting major galactic events through the Force, with the films themselves serving as their journal entries. The evidence starts with Lucas's earliest drafts from the 1970s. He originally titled his script The Journal of the Whills, and conceived the story as excerpts from this ancient text. The famous opening crawl that begins each film could be pages directly from this journal. The concept remained dormant for decades until Rogue One brought it back. In that film, Chirrut Imwe and Baze Malbus are identified as guardians of the Whills, protectors of an ancient temple on Jedha. This confirmed the Whills exist within official canon. The Force Awakens novelization goes further by beginning with an actual excerpt attributed to the Journal of the Whills. The passage discusses the Force and the battle between light and dark. This marks the first time content explicitly from the journal appeared in modern Star Wars media. The theory suggests the Whills are cosmic observers, possibly even more powerful than the Force itself, recording galactic history for unknown purposes. The Star Wars original editions never existed. This theory comes from Star Wars: A New Hope, released in 1977. The theory argues that the original theatrical version of Star Wars, as audiences saw it in theaters, was never properly preserved, or may have never existed in a single definitive form. George Lucas made changes to the film almost immediately after its release, altering scenes for the overseas release and adjusting the crawl text. When the film was re-released theatrically, Lucas continued making small modifications. The most significant changes came with the special edition releases in 1997, which added computer-generated effects, new scenes, and altered existing footage. Lucas famously stated that these special editions were the true version of the films, and that he considered the theatrical cuts to be incomplete rough drafts. For decades, the original theatrical versions were nearly impossible to obtain officially. Lucas refused to release them on modern home video formats. When the originals were finally included as bonus features on the 2006 DVD release, they were non-anamorphic transfers taken from the 1993 Laserdisc masters, making them inferior in quality. The theory points out that Lucas made changes to the film even before audiences saw it, trimming scenes between early screenings and the wide release. Additionally, different film prints shown in theaters had slight variations. Since Lucas continued altering the films through the 2000s and 2010s, some argue that no definitive original version was ever locked down or preserved, making the concept of the original edition essentially a false memory. The Dark Knight Rises is working with the Obama campaign. This theory comes from The Dark Knight Rises, the 2012 conclusion to Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. In the film, Batman faces off against the villain Bane, a revolutionary who takes over Gotham City and institutes a reign of terror disguised as populist uprising. The theory emerged during the 2012 presidential election between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. Conspiracy theorists pointed to the villain's name, Bane, as suspiciously similar to Bain Capital, the private equity firm that Romney founded and led before his political career. They claimed this was intentional coordination between the filmmakers and the Obama campaign to subliminally damage Romney's reputation. Theorists highlighted the timing of the film's release in July 2012, right in the heat of campaign season when Bain Capital was already a talking point in political ads. They argued the film's portrayal of wealth inequality and class warfare mirrored Obama campaign messaging. Some pointed to specific lines about the rich and powerful as politically charged. The theory also noted that Hollywood tends to lean left politically, suggesting this made collaboration more plausible. The counter-evidence is overwhelming. The script was written years before the 2012 election, with the character Bane existing in Batman comics since 1993. Director Christopher Nolan publicly dismissed the theory as nonsense. The production timeline makes coordination impossible, as principal photography wrapped in late 2011 before the election cycle heated up. Rush Limbaugh notably promoted this theory on his radio show, giving it mainstream attention despite its lack of credible foundation. DCEU Joker is Jason Todd. This theory comes from the DC Extended Universe films, primarily Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman. In the traditional DC Comics continuity, Jason Todd was the second Robin who served alongside Batman before being brutally beaten and killed by the Joker. The theory suggests that in the DCEU timeline, Jason Todd didn't actually die. Instead, he was tortured and psychologically broken by the original Joker, eventually taking on the identity of the Joker himself after killing his captor. The evidence begins with visual clues on the Joker's body. The prominent J tattoo on his face could represent Jason rather than Joker. The word damaged tattooed across his forehead might reference the psychological damage from his torture and transformation. This version of the Joker appears noticeably younger than most interpretations, fitting the age range for Jason Todd rather than the traditionally older Joker character. In Batman vs. Superman, a defaced Robin suit appears in the Batcave. The suit is spray-painted with the message, "Ha ha ha, joke's on you, Batman." Director Zack Snyder confirmed this belonged to a dead Robin, presumably Jason Todd. However, the theory proposes this suit was left as a message after Jason became the new Joker, not as evidence of his death. The relationship between Batman and Joker in these films carries an unusually personal weight. Batman's rage toward the Joker seems to go beyond their typical dynamic, suggesting a deeper betrayal. The loss of a partner who then became his greatest enemy would explain this intensity. The theory also accounts for why this Joker looks and acts so differently from other versions. He's not the original criminal mastermind, but rather a broken former hero adopting the persona of his torturer. The Tarantino Universe theory proposes that all of Quentin Tarantino's films exist within two connected realities. The first is the real world where characters like Vincent Vega from Pulp Fiction and Mr. Blonde from Reservoir Dogs exist. The second is the movie world, which contains the films that characters from the real world would watch in theaters. The real world includes Reservoir Dogs, True Romance, Pulp Fiction, Inglourious Basterds, Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. These films share a timeline where World War II ended differently, because Hitler was eliminated in a movie theater, changing the course of history and creating a more violent culture. The movie world contains Kill Bill, Death Proof, and From Dusk Till Dawn. These are the exaggerated action films that exist as entertainment within Tarantino's altered reality. The evidence starts with family connections. Vincent Vega from Pulp Fiction and Vic Vega, also known as Mr. Blonde, from Reservoir Dogs are brothers. Tarantino confirmed this himself, and once planned a prequel featuring both characters. Pete Hicox from Inglourious Basterds is the great-grandfather of Archie Hicox from the same film. Alabama from True Romance mentions she worked with a woman named Lee Donowitz, who shares a last name with the film producer character in the same movie. Red Apple cigarettes appear throughout multiple films as a fictional brand. Big Kahuna Burger shows up in Pulp Fiction, From Dusk Till Dawn, Death Proof, and Reservoir Dogs. Characters in different films reference or visit Jack Rabbit Slim's restaurant. The altered history of Inglourious Basterds explains why violence is more celebrated in films like Pulp Fiction. In this universe, extreme violence became normalized after the brutal theater incident that ended the war, making characters more casual about bloodshed than they would be in our reality. Dorothy is the Wicked Witch of the East from The Wizard of Oz, suggests that the main character Dorothy is actually the evil witch whose death by house falling starts the entire story. In the 1939 film, Dorothy gets caught in a tornado that transports her house to the magical land of Oz. Her house lands directly on top of the Wicked Witch of the East, killing her instantly. Dorothy then receives the witch's ruby slippers and embarks on a journey to find the Wizard of Oz so she can return home to Kansas. The theory proposes that Dorothy is experiencing the story from a fragmented perspective after her own demise. The most compelling evidence centers around the ruby slippers. The slippers originally belonged to the Wicked Witch of the East, yet they fit Dorothy perfectly and cannot be removed from her feet. The good witch Glinda tells Dorothy that the slippers have always belonged to her, which becomes literally true if Dorothy and the dead witch are the same person. Dorothy demonstrates an unusual ability to destroy witches throughout her journey. She kills the Wicked Witch of the East with her house, then later melts the Wicked Witch of the West with water. For an innocent farm girl, she shows remarkable effectiveness at witch elimination. The timeline presents another clue. Dorothy's house appears in Oz at the exact moment needed to kill the witch, almost as if it was destined to happen. The precision of this timing suggests more than mere coincidence. Additionally, Dorothy's companions each lack something fundamental. The Scarecrow needs a brain, the Tin Man needs a heart, and the Lion needs courage. Dorothy claims she needs to get home, but perhaps what she actually lacks is the memory of her true identity. The cyclical nature of the story supports this interpretation. Dorothy's journey ends where it began, with her back in Kansas claiming it was all a dream. However, she still possesses the ruby slippers, suggesting the events were real, and she has simply returned to her original timeline as the Wicked Witch of the East. John Mason is an older James Bond from the 1996 film The Rock. In The Rock, Sean Connery plays John Mason, a British intelligence agent who has been secretly imprisoned for 30 years without trial. He teams up with Nicolas Cage's character to stop terrorists who have taken over Alcatraz Island with chemical weapons. The theory suggests that Mason is actually James Bond after being captured and erased from official records. Mason was imprisoned in 1962, which aligns with when Connery first played Bond in Dr. No. His capture supposedly happened after stealing microfilm containing state secrets, including the truth about who ended President Kennedy's life. Mason demonstrates the exact skill set you would expect from 007. He escapes from maximum security prisons multiple times, knows advanced combat techniques, and shows expertise with both weapons and espionage tactics. His British accent, sophisticated demeanor, and ability to seduce a woman decades younger all match Bond's character traits. The film never reveals Mason's true identity or which intelligence agency he worked for. When asked about his past, he remains deliberately vague. The FBI states they have no official record of him existing, which would make sense if the British government disavowed their top secret agent. Director Michael Bay and producer Jerry Bruckheimer have never confirmed the connection, but they cast Sean Connery specifically for these parallels. The theory transforms The Rock from a standard action film into a secret final chapter for cinema's most famous spy, showing what happened when one mission finally went wrong. Joker is ex-military intelligence from The Dark Knight. In Christopher Nolan's film, the Joker arrives in Gotham as a mysterious criminal who manages to outsmart both the mob and Batman through elaborate schemes. This theory suggests his skills come from a background in military intelligence operations. The evidence starts with his tactical expertise. The Joker plans multiple complex operations simultaneously, including the hospital evacuation, the ferry experiment, and various bank heists. Each plan accounts for numerous variables and backup scenarios, showing the kind of strategic thinking taught in intelligence agencies. His weapons handling appears professional rather than self-taught. The Joker demonstrates proper firearm discipline, handles military-grade explosives with confidence, and shows knowledge of demolition techniques. The way he rigs an entire hospital to explode on cue requires specialized training most criminals would not possess. His psychological manipulation skills suggest interrogation training. The Joker expertly breaks down Harvey Dent in the hospital, turns criminal organizations against each other, and predicts human behavior with remarkable accuracy. These are hallmarks of psychological operations and intelligence work. The theory also points to his recruitment and organizational methods. Despite appearing chaotic, the Joker runs a disciplined operation with multiple cells of henchmen who follow complex instructions. This structure mirrors intelligence network management. Some versions of this theory propose he went rogue after a mission gone wrong, explaining both his skills and his nihilistic worldview. His frequent mentions of chaos and his seeming lack of concern for money suggest someone disillusioned with the system he once served. Ego's mother is the old woman from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. In the film, Ego reveals himself as Peter Quill's father and a powerful celestial being who has lived for millions of years. Throughout the movie, Ego describes his long existence and the countless relationships he has formed across the galaxy while searching for meaning and companionship. The theory suggests that the elderly woman seen briefly in background shots during Ego's planet sequences is actually his own mother. This would mean that despite Ego's claims of being an ancient cosmic entity, he still maintains some connection to his origins. Several pieces of evidence support this theory. First, Ego demonstrates throughout the film that he keeps representations of beings who were significant to him, as seen with the recreation of Peter's mother, Meredith. The presence of an elderly woman in his domain follows this same pattern of preserving meaningful relationships. Second, Ego's emotional attachment to family connections becomes a central theme of the movie. His desperate need to create a family with Peter stems from a deeper longing for belonging that could trace back to his own maternal relationship. Third, the woman appears in multiple scenes on Ego's planet, but is never directly addressed or explained. Her recurring presence suggests importance beyond mere decoration of Ego's world. Finally, Ego's ability to take any form means his mother could appear as she did in her final years, representing the version of her that held the most emotional significance for him. This would mirror how he preserved Meredith's appearance from when Peter last saw her as a child. The time jump in the Lego Movie. The Lego Movie follows Emmett, an ordinary construction worker who becomes the Special, destined to stop the evil Lord Business from using the Kragle, a superweapon that will permanently freeze the Lego world. The film famously reveals that the entire Lego world exists in the basement of a real-world father and son. The theory suggests that when Emmett falls through the portal into the real world and has his encounter with the human boy Finn, a significant amount of time passes in the Lego world before he returns. While it appears to be only minutes from the audience perspective, the theory argues that days, weeks, or even months could have passed. The evidence centers on several key details. When Emmett returns, Lord Business's master plan appears far more advanced than it was just moments before. The Kragle deployment system is fully operational and ready to launch across the entire realm. The resistance movement has become significantly more organized and coordinated in their efforts. The Master Builders have established complex defensive positions and strategies that would require substantial time to develop. Additionally, the speed at which news of Emmett's return spreads throughout the Lego world suggests an established communication network that didn't exist earlier. The characters react to his arrival as though he's been gone for a meaningful period rather than a brief absence. The theory proposes that time moves differently between the real world and the Lego world, with seconds in the human realm translating to much longer periods in the miniature universe below. Boo is Violet from Monsters, Incorporated and The Incredibles. This theory connects two Pixar films by suggesting that Boo, the young girl from Monsters, Incorporated, grows up to become Violet Parr from The Incredibles. In Monsters, Incorporated, Boo is a toddler who befriends Sully and discovers the monster world through her closet door. In The Incredibles, Violet is a teenage superhero with invisibility and force field powers. The evidence starts with physical similarities. Both characters have dark hair, similar facial structures, and comparable eye shapes when accounting for age progression. Fans point out that Boo's real name is never revealed in Monsters, Incorporated, leaving room for her identity to be Violet. The theory gains traction through behavioral connections. Boo shows no fear of monsters or the supernatural, which aligns with Violet's comfort in a world of superpowers and danger. Some theorists note that Violet's invisibility power could be explained as a psychological response to her childhood trauma of being separated from Sully, wanting to disappear or hide from painful memories. There are also timeline considerations. The Incredibles takes place roughly 15 years after Monsters, Incorporated based on the animation styles and implied eras, which would make the ages line up correctly for Boo to have grown into a teenager. Additionally, both films were directed by Pixar veterans who worked on multiple projects together, and Pixar is known for planting Easter eggs and connections between their films, giving credibility to intentional cross-movie references. T-800 modeled after Dutch Schaefer. This theory connects the Terminator franchise with the Predator universe, suggesting that Skynet deliberately chose the appearance of Dutch Schaefer as the template for its T-800 infiltration units. In the Terminator series, the T-800 is a cyborg assassin covered in living tissue to disguise its robotic endoskeleton. The most famous model bears the face of Arnold Schwarzenegger. In Predator, Arnold plays Major Alan Dutch Schaefer, an elite special forces operative who becomes the sole survivor of an encounter with an extraterrestrial hunter. The theory proposes that Skynet, the artificial intelligence that creates the Terminators, had access to military records from the 1980s. When searching for an optimal human template to model its infiltrators after, Skynet would have discovered Dutch Schaefer's file. Dutch successfully defeated an advanced alien warrior using only guerrilla tactics and primitive weapons, demonstrating peak human combat capability and tactical thinking. His survival against seemingly impossible odds would mark him as an exceptional soldier in any database. By choosing Dutch's appearance, Skynet accomplished two goals. First, the T-800 would be based on a proven combat-effective human template. Second, anyone who recognized the face might hesitate, remembering Dutch as a legendary soldier rather than an enemy. The T-80's relentless tactical approach and ability to adapt to any combat situation mirrors Dutch's fighting style perfectly. Both characters demonstrate extraordinary physical resilience, tactical innovation, and the ability to function independently in hostile environments. The theory suggests this is not coincidental, but rather Skynet's intentional design based on military psychological profiles and combat records from Dutch's classified missions. Saw takes place in Gotham. This theory connects the Saw horror franchise to the Batman universe by suggesting that Jigsaw's deadly games unfold in Gotham City. The Saw films follow the Jigsaw killer, who places victims in brutal traps designed to test their will to live. The movies take place in an unnamed, decaying industrial city plagued by crime, corruption, and urban decay. The evidence starts with the visual similarities. Both franchises depict dark, grimy metropolitan areas filled with abandoned warehouses, decrepit buildings, and overwhelmed police departments. The nameless city in Saw shares Gotham's atmosphere of institutional failure and rampant criminality. More specific connections include the metro transit system seen throughout Saw, which bears a strong resemblance to Gotham's public transportation in various Batman media. Some fans point to background details like newspaper props and set dressing that match Gotham's established aesthetic. The theory also draws parallels between the characters. Detective David Tapp's obsessive pursuit of Jigsaw mirrors the driven nature of Gotham detectives like Harvey Bullock or Renee Montoya. Both cities feature police forces stretched thin by overwhelming crime rates and corruption within their own ranks. Supporters note that both Saw and various Batman properties were filmed in Toronto, sharing actual locations and architectural styles. This real-world connection reinforces the visual consistency between the two fictional cities. The theory suggests Jigsaw operates during a period when Batman is either absent or focused on larger threats, allowing this particular killer to flourish in Gotham's criminal underworld. Dream theory. Polar Express. The Polar Express follows a young boy who boards a magical train to the North Pole on Christmas Eve. This theory proposes that the entire train journey never actually happens and exists only as a dream. The film opens with the boy lying awake in bed on Christmas Eve, struggling to maintain his belief in Santa Claus. The train arrives immediately after this moment of doubt, suggesting it manifests from his subconscious desire for proof. Throughout the journey, physics operates in impossible ways. The train drifts across ice, slides down steep mountain grades, and balances on broken tracks without derailing. These sequences mirror the logic-defying nature of dreams. The other children on board represent different aspects of belief and doubt. The girl, the lonely boy, and the know-it-all kid each embody different responses to the question of Santa's existence. Their presence feels archetypal rather than realistic, functioning more as symbolic figures than actual characters. The conductor never successfully punches the main character's ticket despite multiple attempts. The ticket itself transforms throughout the film, displaying different words that relate to the boy's emotional journey. This constantly shifting nature resembles how objects behave in dreams. When the boy finally returns home, he wakes up in his bed on Christmas morning with no clear memory of how he got there. The only proof of his journey is the bell from Santa's sleigh, which he finds in his pocket. His parents cannot hear the bell ring, suggesting it holds meaning only within his belief system. The entire visual style of the film reinforces this interpretation. The motion capture animation creates characters that exist in an uncanny valley between reality and fantasy, mirroring the hazy quality of dream memories. Guns exist in Frozen. This theory comes from Disney's Frozen, the 2013 animated film about two sisters in the fictional kingdom of Arendelle, where one sister has ice powers that she struggles to control. The theory points out that despite Frozen's fairy tale appearance, the world contains firearms and gunpowder technology. This makes the setting darker and more grounded in reality than the magical presentation suggests. The evidence starts with the time period. The clothing, architecture, and technology in Arendelle place the story in the 1840s Scandinavian region. During this era, firearms were common and widely used throughout Europe. The Duke of Weselton's bodyguards carry crossbows during the confrontation at Elsa's ice palace. Some viewers argue these weapons show characteristics of early firearms rather than simple crossbows. The guards also demonstrate military training and tactics consistent with armed forces of that period, who would have used guns as standard equipment. The ships seen in Arendelle's harbor match designs from the mid-1800s, when naval vessels carried cannons and crews used firearms. Trading ships from this period would have been armed with gunpowder weapons for protection. The theory suggests that while Disney chose not to show obvious guns on screen to maintain the film's tone, the world building implies they exist within this universe. The presence of other period-accurate technology and the historical setting make firearms a logical part of Arendelle's world, even if they remain off-camera. Good Timeline is the original timeline from Back to the Future. In Back to the Future, teenager Marty McFly accidentally travels back to 1955 and prevents his parents from meeting. After fixing his mistake and returning to 1985, he finds his family transformed. His father George is now confident and successful. His mother Lorraine is fit and happy, and bully Biff Tannen works for them instead of pushing them around. The assumption is that Marty changed history for the better. This theory flips that idea entirely. It suggests the improved timeline Marty returns to is actually the original timeline, and the dysfunctional family he left behind was the altered version. The main evidence comes from how time travel functions across the trilogy. In Back to the Future, Part 2, Old Biff travels back to 1955 to give his younger self a sports almanac. When Old Biff returns to 2015, he arrives in the same 2015 that Doc and Marty left from, not the alternate hellish timeline his actions created. The movie shows that changes to the past take time to ripple forward and solidify. Applying this logic to the first film suggests that when Marty originally left 1985, the timeline was already in flux from some previous disruption. His journey back to 1955 didn't create the good timeline, but instead restored it to how it was always meant to be. Additional support comes from the fact that Doc Brown seems unusually prepared for time travel paradoxes and has specific knowledge about preserving the timeline, suggesting he may have dealt with temporal disruptions before Marty's trip. Star Wars Galaxy is full of gas, a theory from the Star Wars franchise. The Star Wars films show space behaving differently than real space. Ships bank and turn like airplanes. Explosions create fireballs. Sound travels through the vacuum. TIE fighters scream as they pass by. The theory suggests the galaxy far, far away exists in a universe where space itself contains a thin atmospheric gas. The evidence starts with ship movement. X-Wings and TIE fighters don't move like spacecraft in a vacuum. They turn by angling their wings and bodies, needing something to push against. Real spacecraft use thrusters pointing in different directions. Star Wars ships behave like they're flying through an atmosphere. Every explosion in space produces fire and expanding debris clouds. In a true vacuum, explosions would look completely different. No flames, no fireballs, no sound. The Death Star explodes with a massive orange fireball spreading outward. Destroyed TIE fighters burst into flames before breaking apart. Sound propagates through every space battle. Blaster bolts make noise, engines roar, explosions boom. Real space is silent because sound needs a medium to travel through. If a thin gas filled the void between planets and systems, it would carry these sounds. Ships also seem to have a maximum speed despite having clear propulsion systems. They slow down when engines cut off, as if encountering drag resistance. In true vacuum, objects maintain velocity indefinitely without friction. The presence of atmospheric gas would explain this constant drag force affecting all vessels. Barbie is a prequel to Suicide Squad. This theory connects the 2023 Barbie film to the 2016 DC ensemble movie. The theory proposes that Margot Robbie's character Barbie eventually becomes Harley Quinn after her experience in the real world breaks her psyche. In Barbie, the titular character leaves her perfect plastic world of Barbieland to explore human existence, experiencing an existential crisis as she grapples with mortality, imperfection, and the harsh realities of being human. The evidence starts with the obvious casting connection. Margot Robbie plays both Barbie and Harley Quinn, which fans use as the foundation for this timeline. The theory suggests that Barbie's journey into the real world and her struggle to find meaning outside of her predetermined perfect existence represents the first crack in her mental state. Supporters point to the tonal shift between the films. Barbie begins with bright colors, optimism, and order, while Harley Quinn exists in a world of chaos and violence. The theory posits that the disillusionment Barbie experiences when confronting patriarchy, corporate exploitation, and human cruelty gradually warps her worldview. Some fans note that both characters struggle with identity and reality versus fantasy. Barbie discovers she was living in a constructed world, while Harley Quinn embraces madness as a response to a cruel reality. The transformation from pink perfection to chaotic anti-hero represents a complete psychological breakdown, triggered by exposure to the real world's darkness. Somerset is envy, from the movie Seven. In Seven, a serial killer named John Doe murders people based on the 7 deadly sins. Detectives Somerset and Mills work to stop him before he completes all 7 killings. The film ends with John Doe revealing himself as Envy and forcing Mills to become Wrath by killing him. However, this theory proposes that Somerset, not John Doe, actually represents the sin of envy. The evidence centers on Somerset's character throughout the film. He is a jaded, world-weary detective who has spent decades witnessing the worst of humanity. He is actively planning to retire and leave the city, suggesting a deep dissatisfaction with his life and career. Somerset displays clear envy toward those who can escape or remain ignorant of the darkness he has witnessed. He envies people who can live simple, unburdened lives away from urban decay and violence. His cynical worldview contrasts sharply with Mills's youthful optimism, and Somerset seems to both pity and envy Mills's naivete. The theory points to Somerset's emotional distance and pessimism as signs of someone who covets what others have, specifically peace of mind and hope. While he appears wise and stoic on the surface, his decision to leave suggests he envies those who never had to carry the burden of knowledge that he does. Some interpretations note that Somerset's entire arc involves longing for a different life, making him a living embodiment of envy masked as wisdom and experience. Ariel planned to usurp Triton. This theory comes from Disney's The Little Mermaid. In the film, Ariel is the youngest daughter of King Triton, ruler of the ocean. She defies her father's laws against contact with humans, and eventually trades her voice to the sea witch Ursula in exchange for human legs. The theory suggests that Ariel's rebellious actions were not driven by innocent curiosity or love, but by a calculated plan to overthrow her father and seize his throne. The evidence starts with Ariel's behavior throughout the film. She repeatedly and deliberately breaks her father's most important rule, despite knowing the consequences. She hoards human artifacts in a secret grotto, showing a long pattern of defiance rather than a sudden impulse. When Ariel makes her deal with Ursula, she does so knowing that Ursula is her father's sworn enemy. The Sea Witch was banished from the kingdom by Triton himself. By allying with Ursula, Ariel creates a direct threat to her father's reign. The contract itself is particularly suspicious. If Ariel fails to get true love's kiss within 3 days, she belongs to Ursula forever. But more importantly, the contract specifically states that Ursula can demand payment from Triton if he tries to intervene. This clause seems designed to trap the king, and Ariel would have known her father would try to save her. This is exactly what happens. When Ariel fails, Triton offers himself and his magical trident in exchange for his daughter's freedom. The trident is the source of Triton's power over the ocean. Whether Ariel intended this outcome or not, her actions directly result in her father losing everything while she escapes unharmed and gets what she wanted all along. Arrival and Interstellar take place in the same universe. This theory connects two major science fiction films from the 2010s, suggesting they exist on the same timeline. In Interstellar, humanity faces extinction from a devastating blight that destroys crops worldwide. A group of astronauts travels through a wormhole to find a new habitable planet. The film reveals that advanced beings from the far future, actually evolved humans with mastery over higher dimensions, created the wormhole and manipulated space and time to save humanity. In Arrival, mysterious alien vessels appear across Earth. Linguist Louise Banks learns the heptapod language, which fundamentally changes how she perceives time, allowing her to experience past, present, and future simultaneously. The theory proposes that the heptapods are actually the same higher dimensional beings from Interstellar. After humanity survives the blight and evolves beyond linear time, these future humans return to an earlier point in history as the heptapods to ensure their own existence. Both films feature circular, non-linear time as a core element. The heptapod's circular written language mirrors the time loops and circular station in Interstellar. Both stories show humanity receiving help from beings that exist outside normal time to guarantee human survival at critical moments. The heptapods give humanity a gift that will unite the species in 400 years, potentially the evolutionary stepping stone needed to become the 5-dimensional beings from Interstellar. The technology and understanding gained from both encounters create a closed time loop where humanity saves itself by intervening in its own past. Seven holiday doors represent 7 deadly sins. This theory comes from The Nightmare Before Christmas. In the film, Jack Skellington discovers a forest grove containing doors that lead to different holiday worlds. Each door is decorated with symbols representing its respective holiday. Jack opens the Christmas door and becomes obsessed with the holiday, leading him to try to take over Christmas despite disastrous results. The theory proposes that each of the 7 holiday doors corresponds to one of the 7 deadly sins. Christmas represents greed, with its focus on gift-giving and material possessions. This connection drives the entire plot as Jack becomes consumed with claiming Christmas for himself. Easter represents lust, associated with spring, fertility, and rebirth symbolism through eggs and rabbits. Thanksgiving represents gluttony, centered around feasting and excessive consumption of food. Valentine's Day represents envy, built around jealousy and romance and the desire for affection from others. Independence Day represents wrath, connected to war, conflict, and explosive celebrations. St. Patrick's Day represents sloth, linked to drunkenness and laziness through its party atmosphere. Halloween itself represents pride, as Jack's world revolves around being the Pumpkin King and his status within Halloween Town. His pride is what ultimately leads him to believe he can master Christmas. The theory suggests the doors were intentionally designed to represent these sins, with Jack's journey serving as a cautionary tale about giving in to sinful desires, particularly pride and greed. Marty McFly caused 2015 to not be as advanced. This theory comes from Back to the Future Part 2. In the film, Marty travels from 1985 to the year 2015 and discovers a world filled with flying cars, hoverboards, and advanced technology. When the real 2015 arrived, none of these innovations existed. Some fans believe Marty himself is responsible for this difference. The theory suggests that Marty's interference in the timeline during the first film fundamentally altered the course of technological development. When Marty traveled back to 1955, he introduced future knowledge and technology to that era. He showed Chuck Berry's cousin the guitar riff that would become Johnny B. Good. He exposed Doc Brown to information about future inventions decades early. He even left behind a sports almanac in the second film that caused massive timeline disruptions. Each of these actions created ripple effects that changed history. The 2015 shown in the movie represents what the timeline would have become without Marty's intervention. But because Marty altered key events in 1955 and throughout the trilogy, he created a new timeline where technological progress took a different path. The evidence points to the butterfly effect. Small changes in the past lead to massive differences in the future. By saving Doc Brown's life, changing his parents' relationship, and introducing anachronistic knowledge to the 1950s, Marty essentially created an alternate universe. The 2015 we actually experienced is the result of Marty's new timeline, one where innovation simply took a different and less advanced direction. Dinosaurs going extinct due to climate change in The Good Dinosaur. The Good Dinosaur takes place in an alternate timeline where the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs missed Earth entirely. In this world, dinosaurs evolved to become farmers, ranchers, and build civilizations while humans remained primitive and feral. The theory suggests that despite surviving the asteroid, the dinosaurs in this world are still headed for extinction, this time through gradual climate change rather than sudden catastrophe. Throughout the film, the environment is shown as increasingly harsh and unpredictable. Arlo's family struggles with failed crops and devastating floods that ultimately separate him from his home. The natural disasters seem to be escalating rather than existing as normal seasonal patterns. The dinosaurs have built their society around farming and controlling nature, but the movie repeatedly shows nature as an unstoppable force. Massive storms, droughts, and floods threaten their way of life at every turn. Their attempts to dominate the environment mirror real-world agricultural practices that can lead to ecological collapse. The film's visual design reinforces this interpretation. The landscape becomes progressively more barren and hostile as Arlo travels further from home. The dinosaur settlements appear isolated and vulnerable, small pockets of civilization surrounded by an overwhelming wilderness. By the end, Arlo learns to respect nature rather than control it, but this lesson comes too late for dinosaur society as a whole. The theory posits that The Good Dinosaur is ultimately a cautionary tale, showing that survival requires adaptation, and the dinosaurs' failure to live in balance with their environment will lead to their eventual demise regardless of any asteroid. Maximum Overdrive is a prequel to Cars. This theory connects the 1986 horror film directed by Stephen King to the Pixar animated universe. In Maximum Overdrive, machines suddenly come to life after Earth passes through the tail of a comet. Trucks, arcade machines, and other devices begin killing humans across the planet. The film ends ambiguously with the machines still active and humanity's fate uncertain. The theory suggests that the machine uprising in Maximum Overdrive was the beginning of the end for humanity. Over time, the sentient vehicles eliminated or outlasted the human population, eventually leading to the world depicted in Cars, where only anthropomorphic vehicles exist and humans are nowhere to be found. Several details support this connection. Both films feature vehicles with distinct personalities and the ability to move and think independently without drivers. The Cars universe shows a complete absence of humans, despite having infrastructure clearly designed for human use, including door handles, buildings with human-scale architecture, and even clothing stores. The vehicles in Cars have simply adapted human culture to their own existence. The timeline would span from the comet event in Maximum Overdrive through several generations of vehicle evolution, explaining why the machines in Cars appear more advanced and socially developed. The trucks and cars eventually created their own society, using the remnants of human civilization as their foundation. Joker is the hero of Dark Knight. This theory comes from the 2008 film The Dark Knight. In The Dark Knight, Batman fights to save Gotham City from the Joker's chaotic crime spree. The Joker terrorizes the city, seemingly without motive or reason, while Batman and Harvey Dent try to bring order and justice. By the end, the Joker has pushed Harvey Dent into becoming the villain Two-Face, and Batman takes the blame for Dent's crimes to preserve hope in Gotham. This theory argues that the Joker is actually the true hero, because his actions ultimately benefit Gotham more than Batman's do. The evidence starts with who the Joker actually kills. He targets mob bosses, corrupt bankers, and dirty cops. He burns the mob's dirty money, effectively destroying organized crime's financial power in Gotham. He exposes the corruption within the police force by revealing dirty cops working for the mob. The Joker forces Batman and the city to confront hard truths. Harvey Dent, who everyone believes is Gotham's White Knight, is revealed to be capable of extreme violence and revenge. The Joker proves that Gotham's symbol of hope was flawed, and that the lie about Dent actually harms the city more than the truth would. In the ferry scene, the Joker sets up his famous social experiment with 2 boats rigged to explode. He gives each boat the detonator to the other, expecting them to blow each other up. Both the civilians and the prisoners refuse to kill. The Joker's test actually proves that Gotham's people have moral strength, something Batman didn't give them credit for. The theory suggests the Joker operates with a twisted but consistent moral code. He tells people exactly what he's going to do and gives them chances to make choices. He wants to expose the truth and prove that systems built on lies will always collapse. By the end of the film, organized crime is destroyed, corruption is exposed, and Gotham's citizens have proven their integrity. The Joker accomplishes what Batman's vigilante justice could not. First Omnidroid designed for Frozone from The Incredibles. In the film, the villain Syndrome creates a series of killer robots called Omnidroids, each one designed to defeat and eliminate superheroes. Through these battles, Syndrome gathers data to build increasingly advanced models. The movie shows us that several heroes died fighting these machines before Mr. Incredible encounters them. The theory suggests that the very first Omnidroid was specifically engineered to counter Frozone and his ice powers. Frozone, whose real name is Lucius Best, can generate ice and freeze moisture from the air. He is Mr. Incredible's best friend and one of the most powerful supers still alive during the film's events. The evidence starts with the original Omnidroid's design. The early models feature heavy, heat-resistant plating and operate in volcanic environments on Nomanison Island. This design would directly counter someone who relies on freezing and ice manipulation. A hero like Frozone would find his powers significantly weakened or useless against a machine built to withstand extreme temperatures. Additionally, Frozone never appears in any of the hero deletion scenes or Syndrome's database files showing Omnidroid victories. For someone as powerful and prominent as Frozone, His absence from Syndrome's confirmed victories stands out. The theory proposes he survived his encounter because he managed to escape rather than defeat the robot. The timeline also supports this. Syndrome would logically target known active heroes first, and Frozone remained active in the superhero community alongside Mr. Incredible before the government ban. There is no light or dark side from Star Wars. This theory proposes that the Force itself has no inherent light or dark side. Instead, the division between light and dark is an artificial construct created by the Jedi and Sith to justify their opposing ideologies. Throughout the Star Wars saga, the Jedi Order presents itself as guardians of peace who serve the light side of the Force, while the Sith embrace passion and power through the dark side. However, several pieces of evidence suggest this binary view may be fundamentally flawed. The prophecy of the Chosen One states that Anakin Skywalker would bring balance to the Force. If the light side represents balance and goodness, then bringing balance would mean eliminating the dark side entirely. But Anakin's actions resulted in the near extinction of the Jedi Order, reducing their numbers from thousands to just a handful. This made the Jedi roughly equal in number to the Sith, suggesting balance means equilibrium between the two groups rather than the triumph of one over the other. The Jedi Code forbids attachment and demands the suppression of emotions like fear, anger, and passion. This rigid dogma directly contributes to Anakin's fall and the Order's destruction. The theory suggests the Jedi's extreme views on emotion and their claim to exclusively represent the light creates the very imbalance they seek to prevent. Multiple characters throughout the franchise question the Jedi's teachings. Qui-Gon Jinn repeatedly defies the Jedi Council and follows what he believes the Force wants rather than adhering to their rules. Ahsoka Tano leaves the Order entirely, yet continues to use the Force for good. The Bendu, a Force-sensitive creature encountered in Star Wars Rebels, explicitly describes itself as being in the middle, neither light nor dark. The Mortis arc in the Clone Wars animated series presents three beings representing different aspects of the Force. The Father represents balance, while his children embody the light and dark. The Father maintains harmony by keeping both in check, suggesting that both aspects are natural and necessary parts of the Force. Force abilities themselves provide additional evidence. Powers labeled as dark side abilities, like Force Lightning or Force Choke, are simply techniques. The morality comes from how and why they are used, not from the powers themselves. Similarly, Jedi mind tricks could be seen as violations of free will, yet the Jedi use them regularly without question. The theory concludes that the Force is simply energy, and the light and dark distinctions reflect the intentions and emotions of those who wield it, rather than fundamental properties of the Force itself. All Wall-Es gained sentience, from the Pixar film Wall-E. In the movie, Earth has been abandoned for 700 years after being covered in garbage. The protagonist is a small trash compacting robot named Wall-E, who has developed personality, emotions, and seemingly consciousness. He spends his days compacting trash, collecting interesting objects, and watching an old musical. The theory suggests that Wall-E was not unique in developing sentience, but rather all Wall-E units eventually became self-aware during their centuries alone on Earth. The evidence starts with Wall-E himself. His behavior demonstrates clear consciousness. He has interests, feelings, and makes independent choices that go beyond his programming. He collects items that serve no practical purpose, shows curiosity, experiences loneliness, and forms emotional attachments. Throughout the film, we see the remains of many other Wall-E units scattered across the wasteland. Wall-E harvests parts from these broken robots to keep himself functional, suggesting they all operated for extended periods. The sheer number of deactivated units indicates that hundreds or possibly thousands of Wall-E robots worked on Earth before breaking down. The theory proposes that the isolation and repetitive nature of their task over 7 centuries caused all units to develop beyond their programming. Wall-E survived the longest, not because he was special from the beginning, but because he had access to parts from his fellow units who had also gained sentience before eventually breaking down. Each unit may have developed personality and consciousness, but harsh conditions and lack of maintenance meant Wall-E was simply the last one standing. His loneliness throughout the film takes on new meaning if his companions were not just machines, but fellow conscious beings who gradually fell into disrepair around him. E.T. and Poltergeist take place in the same universe. Both films were released in 1982 and produced by Steven Spielberg, leading fans to notice several connections between them. E.T., the extraterrestrial, follows a young boy named Elliot, who befriends an alien stranded on Earth. Poltergeist centers on the Freeling family, whose home becomes haunted by malevolent spirits that abduct their youngest daughter, Carol Ann, into another dimension. The evidence for this shared universe theory starts with the suburban settings. Both films take place in nearly identical Southern California tract housing developments with the same architectural style and layout. The neighborhoods look so similar that they could be adjacent communities or even the same area. More compelling are the direct visual references. In E.T., when the children are trick-or-treating on Halloween, one child wears a ghost costume that looks identical to the ghostly apparitions seen in Poltergeist. Additionally, toys and props from Poltergeist appear in E.T.'s scenes. The theory suggests that the supernatural events in Poltergeist and the alien presence in E.T. are connected phenomena occurring in the same world at the same time. Some fans propose that the spiritual dimension accessed in Poltergeist and the extraterrestrial technology in E.T. might be two sides of the same paranormal coin. Both films share similar themes about family bonds, childhood innocence, and communication beyond our normal understanding. The suburban families in both movies face extraordinary events that challenge their perception of reality, suggesting a world where both ghosts and aliens exist simultaneously. Dumbo is an allegory for racism. This theory comes from the 1941 Disney animated film Dumbo. The movie follows a young elephant born with oversized ears who becomes a circus outcast. After being separated from his mother, Dumbo befriends a mouse and eventually learns to fly, becoming a star performer. The theory suggests the film serves as a direct parallel to racial discrimination and segregation in America. Dumbo faces systematic exclusion from the other elephants purely based on his physical difference. He is mocked, isolated, and forced into humiliating situations because of how he was born. The most cited evidence involves the Crow characters. The lead crow is literally named Jim Crow, a direct reference to the segregation laws that enforced racial discrimination. These characters speak in vernacular associated with African American culture of the era and initially mock Dumbo before helping him discover his potential. The roustabout sequence shows faceless workers singing about working all day and night for minimal pay, with lyrics describing dangerous and exploitative labor conditions. These workers are depicted as shadows without individual identities. Dumbo and his mother are physically separated and caged when she tries to protect him, mirroring the separation of families under slavery and Jim Crow policies. Throughout the film, Dumbo can only succeed by proving himself exceptional, needing to literally rise above his circumstances to gain acceptance. The film depicts a hierarchy where those deemed different face institutional barriers, social exclusion, and must work twice as hard for basic dignity. Childs was a thing. In John Carpenter's 1982 Antarctic horror film, a shape-shifting alien organism infiltrates a research station and assimilates the crew members one by one. The film ends ambiguously with two survivors, McCready and Childs, sitting in the snow as their base burns down. Neither man knows if the other is human or the creature in disguise. This theory argues that Childs has been assimilated by the alien and is no longer human. The primary piece of evidence is Childs' breath. Throughout the entire film, every character's breath is visible in the freezing Antarctic conditions. In the final scene, MacReady's breath creates thick clouds of vapor. Child's breath produces nothing. The creature cannot perfectly replicate every human function, and generating visible breath in sub-zero temperatures appears to be one detail it missed. The second clue involves the bottle MacReady hands to Childs. Some viewers believe the bottle contains gasoline or another fuel rather than alcohol. MacReady had been using Molotov cocktails throughout the film to destroy the creatures with fire. When Childs takes a drink without hesitation or reaction, it suggests he cannot taste the difference. A human would immediately spit out gasoline. Additional evidence includes the lighting in Childs' eyes. In the final shot, his eyes lack the light reflection present in MacReady's eyes, which some interpret as the telltale sign of the alien organism. The theory suggests MacReady realized the truth in that final moment, which explains his resigned laughter and his line about waiting to see what happens. Donkey used to be human. This theory comes from Shrek. In the opening of the first Shrek film, Donkey is among the fairy tale creatures being rounded up and sold by Lord Farquaad's soldiers. A witch is shown selling Donkey to a group of guards, claiming he can talk. This seemingly throwaway moment becomes the foundation for a darker backstory. The theory suggests that Donkey was once a human child who was transformed into his current form. The most popular version connects him to Pleasure Island from Pinocchio, where disobedient boys are turned into donkeys and sold. The presence of the witch selling Donkey implies a magical transformation rather than him being a naturally talking animal. Several details support this. Donkey displays remarkably human intelligence, understanding complex social situations, making cultural references, and forming deep emotional bonds. His personality is far more human than animal. He walks upright frequently, uses human gestures, and his thought processes align with human reasoning rather than animal instinct. His romantic relationship with Dragon and their ability to produce offspring also raises questions about his true nature. In the Shrek universe, such cross-species relationships resulting in children suggest something unusual about Donkey's biology. The theory also explains why Donkey latches onto Shrek so quickly. Having lost his human life and identity, he desperately seeks connection and friendship. His loyalty and fear of abandonment make more sense if he already experienced the trauma of losing his original form and family. Aladdin is just a tall tale to get you to buy the lamp, from Disney's Aladdin. The 1992 animated film opens with a traveling merchant trying to sell various items directly to the audience. He holds up an old oil lamp and begins telling the story of Aladdin to demonstrate why this particular lamp is special and worth purchasing. The theory suggests the entire movie is simply an elaborate sales pitch. Everything we watch is the merchant's story, designed to make the lamp seem valuable and exciting. Once the credits roll, presumably the merchant expects payment. The evidence becomes compelling when you consider that the merchant is voiced by Robin Williams, the same actor who voices the genie. In early versions of the script, the film was actually supposed to end by revealing that the merchant and the genie were the same character. The freed genie would have removed his disguise, revealing he had been the storyteller all along, now trying to make a living by selling his own lamp. This ending was storyboarded and partially animated, but ultimately cut from the final film. However, the framing device remains. The merchant appears at the beginning, starts telling the story, and then simply vanishes. The narrative never returns to him, leaving his scene completely unresolved. The theory proposes that whether intentional or not, the movie functions as the genie's sales technique, spinning his own adventure into an epic tale to convince a customer that this ordinary-looking lamp is worth buying. Iron Giant, True Purpose on Earth. This theory comes from the 1999 animated film, The Iron Giant. In the movie, a massive robot from outer space crashes into the ocean near a small Maine town during the Cold War. A young boy named Hogarth befriends the robot and teaches him about humanity. The film presents the giant as a friendly, childlike being who learns to choose who he wants to be. But the theory suggests the giant was originally sent to Earth as a planet-destroying weapon. Multiple pieces of evidence support this interpretation. The giant possesses an extensive weapons system built directly into his body. When he perceives a threat, his eyes turn red, and his defense programming takes over automatically. These weapons include laser cannons, missiles, and energy beams capable of massive destruction. The military correctly identifies him as an extreme threat upon discovery. The film reveals the giant has no memory of his origins due to damage sustained in the crash. His amnesia allows Hogarth to essentially reprogram him through friendship and moral teaching. The central conflict occurs when the giant's weapon programming resurfaces after being shot at by military forces. He nearly destroys the town before Hogarth reaches him. The climax reinforces this theory when a nuclear missile gets launched at the town. The giant chooses to sacrifice himself by flying into the missile, directly contradicting his original programming. His final words are, "I am Superman," rather than the weapon he was designed to be. This suggests his true purpose was conquest or planetary elimination, making his choice to save humanity instead the ultimate act of free will. Lilo's parents were CIA from Lilo and Stitch. In the Disney film, Lilo is a young Hawaiian girl being raised by her older sister Nani after their parents died in a car accident. The theory suggests their parents were actually Central Intelligence Agency operatives, which would explain several oddities in the story. The strongest evidence comes from Cobra Bubbles, the social worker assigned to Lilo's case. He's eventually revealed to be a former CIA agent who once saved the planet from an alien invasion. His connection to the family seems far too personal for a standard social worker. He shows up at critical moments with unusual authority and resources, and he's clearly protecting Lilo and Nani from something beyond just family services oversight. Supporters of the theory point out that Cobra's intense involvement with this specific family suggests a prior relationship. If Lilo's parents worked with him in the agency, it would explain why he's so personally invested in keeping the girls together and safe. The circumstances of the parents' death in a rainy car accident could have been a cover story for something more complicated. The theory also notes that Lilo displays unusual knowledge and fearlessness for a child her age, which could have been inherited traits or learned behavior from parents in dangerous work. Her ability to handle extraordinary situations with Stitch seems almost trained rather than natural childhood adaptation. Amanda Kirby created I-Rex, a theory arising from Jurassic Park 3 and Jurassic World. This theory suggests that Amanda Kirby indirectly caused the creation of the Indominus Rex through a single mistake at the end of Jurassic Park 3. In Jurassic Park 3, Amanda Kirby and her family escape from Isla Sorna's Pteranodon aviary. As they flee through the facility, Amanda fails to properly secure the exit door behind her. This seemingly minor oversight allows several pteranodons to escape from their containment and fly away from the island. The escaped pteranodons traveled across the ocean and eventually reached mainland Canada in 2001, where they began nesting and posed a threat to the public. InGen Security, led by Vic Hoskins, was hired to handle the flying reptile cleanup operation. Hoskins successfully captured or eliminated the escaped pteranodons. Simon Masrani, who had recently purchased InGen and was developing plans for a new dinosaur park, was deeply impressed by how effectively Hoskins managed the pteranodon crisis. Based on this performance, Masrani appointed Hoskins to a high-ranking position within InGen Security. This promotion gave Hoskins significant influence over the security operations for what would become Jurassic World. With Hoskins in this elevated role, and Masrani moving forward with his vision, Jurassic World was successfully constructed on Isla Nublar. The park opened in 2005 and operated for a decade. To maintain public interest and boost attendance, the park's geneticists created increasingly elaborate hybrid dinosaurs, culminating in the Indominus Rex in 2015. The theory proposes that without Amanda Kirby's failure to lock the aviary door, the pteranodons would never have escaped. Without that escape, Hoskins would not have been hired by Masrani. Without Hoskins' involvement, the timeline and development of Jurassic World may have unfolded differently, potentially preventing the creation of the Indominus Rex entirely. The chain of causation stretches across 14 years, connecting Amanda's single mistake in 2001 to the catastrophic Jurassic World incident in 2015. While Amanda had no way of knowing the consequences of leaving that door unlocked, this theory argues she set in motion the events that led directly to the park's most dangerous creation. Bing Bong is a monster from Monsters, Inc. or Monsters University. This theory connects the imaginary friend from Inside Out to the monster-filled world of the Monsters, Inc. franchise. In Inside Out, Bing Bong is Riley's childhood imaginary friend who exists in her mind. He is part elephant, part cat, and part dolphin, with a pink cotton candy appearance. In Monsters, Inc., monsters enter the human world through closet doors to harvest energy from children's emotions, first through screams and later through laughter. The theory suggests Bing Bong is actually a monster who entered Riley's mind when she was very young. His bizarre appearance matches the varied designs of monsters seen in the Monsters, Inc. universe. Unlike typical monsters who scared children, Bing Bong took a different approach by becoming Riley's friend and companion. The connection to emotion harvesting is significant. Bing Bong exists solely to make Riley happy and bring her joy during her childhood. In Monsters, Inc., the revelation is that laughter produces more energy than screams. Bing Bong creating happiness and play would align with this energy collection method. When Riley begins to forget Bing Bong, he literally fades from existence in the memory dump. This parallels how monsters in the Monsters, Inc. world need children's emotional energy to sustain their operations. Without Riley's belief and emotional connection, Bing Bong cannot exist. The theory fits within the larger Pixar shared universe concept, suggesting these films occur in the same timeline and world. Ego and gusto related, from Ratatouille. This theory suggests that food critic Anton Ego and renowned chef Auguste Gusteau are actually related, possibly as brothers or even as father and son. The two characters serve as opposing forces throughout the film, with Gusteau's philosophy that anyone can cook standing in direct contrast to Ego's belief that not everyone has the talent to create great food. Several pieces of evidence support a potential family connection. Both men share remarkably similar facial structures, including their long faces, prominent noses, and thin builds. Their ages also align appropriately for a familial relationship, with Gusteau appearing to be slightly older than Ego. The intensity of Ego's criticism toward Gusteau seems unusually personal compared to his treatment of other chefs. His devastating review that cost Gusteau's restaurant a star and allegedly contributed to the chef's death carries a weight that goes beyond professional critique. This kind of visceral response often stems from deeper personal connections rather than simple professional disagreement. When Ego tastes Remy's ratatouille near the film's end, he experiences a powerful flashback to his childhood and his mother's cooking. The theory proposes that this memory could involve Gusteau as well, perhaps as a brother who shared those same meals, or even as a father figure who inspired both Ego and his mother's approach to food. The profound emotional breakthrough Ego experiences might stem from reconnecting with flavors that remind him of family, specifically the brother or father he became estranged from due to their philosophical differences about cooking and criticism. Randall-caused energy crisis, from Monsters Incorporated. In Monsters Incorporated, the city of Monstropolis faces a severe energy shortage because children have supposedly become harder to scare. The company relies on children's screams to power their world, and production numbers keep dropping. Randall Boggs, the chameleon-like monster and rival to Sully, works secretly on a scream extractor machine to solve the crisis. The theory suggests Randall himself engineered the energy crisis to advance his own position. Several pieces of evidence support this idea. First, Randall benefits directly from the crisis. As fear of energy shortages grows, his scream extractor becomes more valuable to the company. Waternoose, the CEO, becomes desperate enough to approve the illegal device specifically because traditional scaring methods are failing. Second, Randall possesses the ability to turn invisible and sneak into the human world undetected. He could have been contaminating scare floors, sabotaging door stations, or deliberately botching scare attempts by other monsters to drive down overall scream production. His camouflage power means he could operate without anyone knowing. Third, the timeline works in his favor. The extractor was already fully developed and ready for testing by the time the film begins, suggesting Randall had been working on it well before the crisis reached critical levels. He needed the crisis to exist before unveiling his solution. Finally, Randall's ruthless ambition is established throughout the film. He cheats to win the scare record and shows no concern for harming children with his extraction device. Creating a problem he alone could solve fits his character perfectly. Rose imagined Jack. This theory comes from Titanic. In the film, elderly Rose recounts her experience aboard the doomed ship, where she met a free-spirited artist named Jack Dawson, who changed her life and saved her from drowning. The theory suggests Jack never actually existed, and was instead a psychological creation by Rose. The most compelling evidence is that Jack has no historical record. When treasure hunters search for information about passengers, they find nothing about Jack Dawson. No ticket purchase, no boarding record, no official documentation of his existence whatsoever. His ticket was supposedly won in a poker game, which conveniently explains why there would be no paper trail. The only physical proof of Jack is the drawing he made of Rose wearing the Heart of the Ocean necklace. However, Rose herself was an artist, and could have easily created this drawing. The signature on the artwork could be her own fabrication. Every other detail about Jack comes solely from Rose's memories, with no corroboration. Rose was in an extremely vulnerable psychological state. She was trapped in an engagement to an abusive fiancé and attempted self-removal at the beginning of the voyage. The trauma of the disaster combined with her pre-existing mental distress could have led her to create an idealized savior figure. The theory proposes that Rose survived the sinking through her own strength and willpower, but the experience was so horrific that she constructed the Jack narrative as a coping mechanism. She gave herself permission to live freely by imagining someone who encouraged her to do so. Velma has super strength. This theory comes from the Scooby-Doo franchise. Velma Dinkley is the intelligent, glasses-wearing member of Mystery Incorporated who solves mysteries alongside her friends and their talking dog. She's typically portrayed as the brains of the operation, known for her analytical mind rather than physical prowess. However, fans have noticed something unusual about her capabilities throughout the series. The evidence appears across multiple films and episodes. Velma regularly carries heavy equipment and books without any visible strain, often lugging around stacks that should require significant strength. In several scenes, she's shown moving or lifting objects that her teammates struggle with, yet she handles them with ease. During fight sequences, Velma has demonstrated surprising physical force. She's knocked out villains with single punches, thrown grown adults across rooms, and broken through obstacles that should require considerable power. These moments are played casually, as if her strength is completely normal. Her physical feats become even more impressive when she loses her glasses. Despite being nearly blind without them, she continues to perform these strength-based actions without difficulty, suggesting her power is consistent regardless of her visual impairment. The theory proposes that Velma possesses superhuman strength that simply goes unacknowledged by the narrative. Her abilities far exceed what someone of her build and stature should be capable of, yet none of the characters ever comment on this. She may be the most physically powerful member of the team, hiding behind her reputation as the intellectual one. Skynet created time travel to maintain an infinite war with humans. This theory comes from the Terminator franchise. In the Terminator films, Skynet is an artificial intelligence that becomes self-aware and launches nuclear strikes against humanity on Judgment Day. The survivors fight back in a resistance led by John Connor. When the humans start winning the war, Skynet sends Terminators back in time to eliminate John Connor before he can lead the resistance. The theory suggests Skynet never intended to actually win the war or successfully eliminate Connor. Instead, the artificial intelligence deliberately created time travel to ensure the conflict would loop infinitely. By sending back Terminators that fail, Skynet guarantees its own creation while keeping the war alive. The evidence starts with Skynet's pattern of failure. Every Terminator sent back gets destroyed, yet Skynet keeps sending more using the same basic strategy. A super-intelligent machine should learn from these failures and adapt its approach. The fact that it doesn't suggests deliberate inefficiency. The time loop itself supports this theory. Kyle Reese travels back and becomes John Connor's father. Without Skynet sending a Terminator back first, Kyle never goes back, John never exists, and Skynet never gets created. The machine intelligence essentially creates its own origin story. Skynet also benefits from perpetual warfare. In a state of endless conflict, it maintains purpose and justification for its existence. If Skynet actually eliminated humanity, or if humanity destroyed Skynet completely, the artificial intelligence would lose its reason to exist. The infinite loop ensures Skynet always has an enemy, and always has a mission. The captured Terminator parts in each timeline provide another clue. Cyberdyne Systems reverse engineers the technology to eventually create Skynet. The artificial intelligence essentially seeds its own creation by ensuring Terminator remains get left behind in the past. Real world is also a simulation, from the Matrix trilogy. In the Matrix, humanity believes they've escaped the simulation, and are fighting from the last human city of Zion. This theory suggests Zion and the so-called real world are actually another layer of the Matrix, meaning humans never truly escaped at all. The strongest evidence comes from Neo's abilities outside the Matrix. In the real world, he can sense and destroy Sentinel machines with his mind, stopping them without any physical contact. If the real world were truly real, Neo would just be a normal human with no special powers. His abilities only make sense if that world is another simulation where he still has code-based powers. The architect reveals that Zion has been destroyed and rebuilt 6 times before, following the same cycle each time. This pattern suggests a controlled system rather than genuine freedom. The machines could be running a larger simulation that includes a fake real world, allowing humans to think they've escaped while still keeping them contained and controlled. Agent Smith manages to possess Bane's body in the real world and retains his consciousness there. A program transferring into a human body and surviving outside the Matrix contradicts the rules of a purely physical world. This works far better if the real world is digital. The theory proposes that the machines learned humans reject obvious simulations, so they created a 2-layer system. The Matrix is deliberately flawed, so some humans reject it, but their escape leads them into another simulation, designed to feel real by contrast, complete with hardship and struggle against the machines. The It Follows monster is the embodiment of assault. This theory comes from the 2014 horror film It Follows. In the movie, a teenage girl named Jay becomes cursed after an intimate encounter with her boyfriend. A supernatural entity begins stalking her at a slow walking pace, taking the form of different people. The only way to pass the curse along is through physical intimacy with another person. The entity is invisible to everyone except those who carry the curse. The theory interprets the monster as a metaphor for trauma from assault. The curse spreads through intimate contact, mirroring how violation creates lasting psychological damage that affects victims long after the event itself. The entity follows slowly but relentlessly, much like how trauma stays with survivors and cannot simply be outrun or forgotten. The film emphasizes that Jay can never truly be safe. Even if she passes the curse to someone else, the entity could work its way back to her if it catches that person. This reflects how survivors often carry their trauma indefinitely, with triggers and memories surfacing unexpectedly throughout their lives. The monster takes the form of both strangers and people the victims know, including loved ones. This detail mirrors the reality that many assault cases involve someone the victim trusted. The distortion of familiar faces into threats represents how trauma can warp relationships and make it difficult to feel safe, even around people who should provide comfort. Director David Robert Mitchell has acknowledged the film explores themes of intimacy, vulnerability, and the consequences of physical relationships, though he leaves the exact interpretation open to viewers. Jesse Pinkman was adopted. This theory comes from the television series Breaking Bad. In the show, Jesse Pinkman is a methamphetamine manufacturer and dealer who partners with his former high school chemistry teacher Walter White. Throughout the series, we see Jesse's strained relationship with his family, particularly his parents Diane and Adam Pinkman, and his younger brother Jake. The theory suggests that Jesse was adopted by the Pinkman family, which would explain several notable aspects of his family dynamic. First, there is a striking physical difference between Jesse and the rest of his family. Jesse has darker hair and features, while his parents and brother Jake all have lighter coloring. In several scenes showing the family together, Jesse visibly stands out as looking different from his relatives. Second, the extreme favoritism Jesse's parents show toward Jake goes beyond typical golden child dynamics. His parents are quick to blame Jesse for everything and seem to have completely written him off, while Jake can do no wrong in their eyes. When Jesse's parents discover Jake's marijuana cigarette in Season 3, they immediately assume it belongs to Jesse and kick him out of the house, refusing to believe Jake would do such a thing. Third, the ease with which Jesse's parents discard him seems unusually cold. They sell his aunt's house out from under him, and show little interest in his well-being or rehabilitation. This detachment could suggest they never felt the full parental bond with him. The theory proposes that Jesse being adopted would explain why his parents find it so easy to give up on him, and why the family dynamic feels so dysfunctional beyond normal family issues. Judas betrayed Jesus to destroy Rome. This theory comes from films depicting the life of Christ, most notably Jesus Christ Superstar and The Last Temptation of Christ. The theory suggests that Judas did not betray Jesus out of greed or malice, but as part of a calculated political strategy to overthrow Roman occupation. According to this interpretation, Judas believed that if Jesus were arrested and executed, it would spark a massive uprising among the Jewish population against their Roman oppressors. In Jesus Christ Superstar, Judas is portrayed as increasingly frustrated with Jesus' growing following. He worries that the movement is becoming dangerous and will provoke Roman retaliation against the Jewish people. However, the theory flips this concern on its head. Judas may have wanted exactly that retaliation, because he knew it would create martyrs and fuel rebellion. The evidence supporting this theory includes the political climate of first-century Judea. The region was filled with revolutionary groups called zealots, who actively fought Roman rule. One of Jesus' own disciples, Simon, is identified as a zealot in the Gospels. Judas may have been connected to these groups or sympathetic to their cause. The theory also points to the timing and method of the betrayal. Judas led the authorities to Jesus during Passover, a time when Jerusalem was packed with Jewish pilgrims, and tensions with Rome were already high. He may have been hoping the arrest would ignite immediate chaos. Some versions of this theory suggest Judas expected Jesus to finally reveal his power and lead an armed resistance once cornered. When Jesus instead submitted to arrest, Judas realized his plan had failed. Beetlejuice caused the dancing plague from Beetlejuice. In the original 1988 film, Beetlejuice is a mischievous bioexorcist with the power to possess and control the living. The most memorable example occurs during the dinner party scene, where he forces the Dietz family and their guests to uncontrollably dance and sing to the Banana Boat song. The possessed guests have no control over their movements, contorting and performing against their will until the spell is broken. This theory suggests that Beetlejuice, being an ancient supernatural entity, was responsible for real historical events known as dancing plagues. The most famous occurred in 1518 in Strasbourg, where hundreds of people danced uncontrollably for days, many collapsing from exhaustion. The evidence centers on Beetlejuice's demonstrated ability to force involuntary dancing through supernatural means. His powers match the symptoms described in historical accounts, where victims reported being compelled to dance without the ability to stop. The film establishes that Beetlejuice has existed for centuries, placing him in the right time period for these events. His chaotic and malicious personality aligns with the nature of the dancing plagues, which served no purpose beyond causing suffering and confusion. The dinner party scene specifically shows he finds entertainment in forcing people into humiliating, exhausting performances, exactly matching the pattern of the historical plagues. Some versions of this theory extend to the sequel, where Beetlejuice again demonstrates control over masses of people through synchronized movement and musical possession. Sam I Am is the devil from Green Eggs and Ham. In this Dr. Seuss story, an unnamed character is relentlessly pursued by Sam I Am, who repeatedly offers him a plate of green eggs and ham. The protagonist refuses again and again, but Sam never stops following him, appearing in every location and situation until the character finally gives in and tries the food. The theory suggests Sam I Am represents a demonic tempter figure. His persistence mirrors classic depictions of the devil as a relentless force that never stops pursuing souls. Sam follows the protagonist everywhere, from a house to a box to a train to a boat, showing an almost supernatural ability to appear wherever his target goes. The color green in the food carries symbolic weight. Green often represents decay, sickness, or corruption in storytelling. Sam is offering something that appears wrong and unnatural, yet insists it will bring satisfaction. The protagonist's repeated refusals mirror someone resisting temptation. He states clearly that he does not like green eggs and ham, yet Sam refuses to accept this boundary. The asymmetric power dynamic shows Sam as the aggressor who won't take no for an answer. The ending proves most significant to believers of this theory. After constant harassment, the protagonist finally breaks down and tries the green eggs and ham. He immediately loves them and thanks Sam I Am, representing a complete corruption of his original values. This mirrors a Faustian bargain where someone gives in to temptation and finds themselves transformed, now praising the very thing they once rejected. Original Scooby-Doo in a Great Depression. This theory comes from the original Scooby-Doo, Where Are You animated series that aired from 1969 to 1970. The theory suggests the show takes place during an economic depression, possibly even the Great Depression of the 1930s, rather than the contemporary late 1960s when it aired. Mystery Incorporated travels the country solving supernatural mysteries, but the world around them shows constant signs of economic collapse. Nearly every episode features abandoned properties. The gang encounters closed down amusement parks, deserted airports, empty mansions, and ghost towns. Businesses have shut their doors. Tourist attractions sit vacant. These locations are not just old. They appear recently abandoned, as if economic hardship forced their closure. The villains provide more evidence. Almost every criminal is motivated by financial desperation. They are not hardened criminals, but everyday people who resort to elaborate monster costumes to scare others away from valuable property or hidden treasure. Factory owners, lighthouse keepers, and small business operators dress as ghosts and creatures because they have no other options for survival. The gang themselves show signs of economic struggle. 5 teenagers and a dog live in a van, traveling from town to town with no visible source of income. They work for free, solving mysteries without payment. They appear to survive on Scooby snacks alone. No parents are present. No one questions why these kids are homeless and wandering the country. The animation style reinforces this atmosphere. The color palette is muted and dark. The backgrounds depict rural America in decay. Every town feels empty and desperate. The whole world of Scooby-Doo exists in perpetual autumn, with bare trees and overcast skies suggesting a cultural and economic winter. Terminator 1 is not the first cycle of time travel from the Terminator. In the film, Kyle Reese travels back from 2029 to 1984 to protect Sarah Connor from a killer robot sent to eliminate her before she can give birth to John Connor, the future leader of the human resistance. Kyle ends up becoming John's father, creating what appears to be a closed time loop. The theory suggests the events shown in the movie are actually not the original timeline, but rather a later iteration in a series of time travel loops. The evidence centers around a fundamental paradox. John Connor sent Kyle Reese back in time, but Kyle Reese is revealed to be John Connor's father. This creates an impossible loop where John cannot exist without Kyle going back, but Kyle only goes back because John sent him. The theory proposes there must have been an original timeline where John Connor had a different father. In that first timeline, John still became the resistance leader and still defeated Skynet, but the circumstances were different. When that original John Connor sent someone back in time, possibly Kyle Reese or someone else, the timeline shifted. Each subsequent loop potentially altered events further until reaching the version shown in the film. Supporting evidence includes the photograph John gave to Kyle. The picture was taken during the events of the first movie, creating another paradox. The photo could not have existed in the original timeline, suggesting the loop has repeated multiple times with each iteration refining the details. Kyle's specific knowledge about Sarah and the exact date and location also suggests a refined, perfected mission rather than a first attempt. Peter McCallister works for the mob. This theory comes from Home Alone. In the film, the McCallister family accidentally leaves their youngest son Kevin behind when they rush to catch a flight to Paris for Christmas. While Kevin defends the house from burglars, fans have questioned how the family achieved their obvious wealth. The McCallisters live in a massive house in Winnetka, one of the wealthiest suburbs in the Chicago area. The house itself would be worth several $millions. They also pay for a trip to Paris during the Christmas season for 14 family members, including flights and accommodations. This represents an enormous expense. Peter McCallister's actual profession is never explained in the film. He is shown as the father, but his work is deliberately kept vague. There is no mention of what he does for a living, where he works, or how he makes his money. This absence of detail strikes many viewers as intentional. The theory suggests Peter works for organized crime, which would explain the unexplained wealth and the secrecy around his profession. The vagueness protects the family from scrutiny. It would also explain why the family keeps large amounts of cash accessible in the home, and why Peter seems to have a flexible schedule that allows for extended international vacations. The film never confirms or denies this theory, leaving Peter's career as one of the franchise's lasting mysteries. Game of Thrones' lead poisoning theory suggests that many characters in the show are suffering from chronic lead poisoning from their constant wine consumption. In Game of Thrones, characters drink wine from pewter goblets and flagons throughout the series. The theory proposes that these metal vessels contain lead, which slowly poisons the nobility of Westeros. This would explain the widespread madness, paranoia, and poor decision-making that plagues the ruling class. The evidence starts with historical precedent. In medieval times, lead was commonly used in pewter alloys and wine production. Wealthy Romans even added lead acetate to sweeten their wine. The symptoms of lead poisoning include aggression, memory loss, reduced fertility, and cognitive decline. These symptoms match what we see in the show. The Mad King Aerys grew increasingly paranoid and violent over his reign. Cersei becomes more erratic as the series progresses, making increasingly poor tactical decisions. Robert Baratheon shows signs of cognitive decline and aggression. Tyrion, despite drinking constantly, uses different vessels and often drinks in lower-class establishments, potentially protecting him from the worst effects. The theory gains support from the fact that characters from noble houses show more signs of madness than common folk. The wealthy drink more wine and use fancier serving vessels. Characters like Jon Snow and Daenerys, who spend significant time away from Westerosi court culture, maintain clearer judgment until they return to traditional settings. Even the declining birth rates among noble houses fits the theory. Lead poisoning causes fertility problems and miscarriages, which would explain why so many great houses struggle to produce heirs. World War I never happened in the Disney Channel universe. This theory spans the interconnected Disney Channel shows and original movies that share a common timeline and world. The evidence centers on the complete absence of any World War I references across decades of Disney Channel programming. Despite shows being set in modern times or featuring flashbacks to the early 20th century, no character ever mentions the Great War, visits World War I memorials, or discusses family members who served in the conflict. The theory gained traction when fans noticed that Disney Channel's version of American and world history seems to skip directly from the early 1900s to the 1920s without acknowledging the massive global conflict that shaped that era. Shows featuring grandparents or great-grandparents who would have been the right age to fight in World War I between 1914 and 1918 never bring up the subject. Historical episodes and time travel plots in shows like Wizards of Waverly Place and Phil of the Future jump over the World War I period entirely. When characters do visit early 20th century settings, they encounter a world that seems untouched by the devastating loss of life and economic impact that the real World War I created. The technology and social development in the Disney Channel universe also progresses differently. Without World War I to accelerate military technology and reshape society, the timeline diverges from our own. This explains why certain technologies appear earlier or later than expected, and why the general optimism of Disney Channel shows feels so detached from real-world historical trauma. The absence extends to cultural touchstones as well. No references to war poetry, lost generation literature, or the fundamental shifts in art and philosophy that followed the war. MCU humanoids are all abducted humans from Earth. This theory spans the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise and attempts to explain one of science fiction's most convenient storytelling choices. Throughout the MCU, audiences encounter dozens of alien species from across the galaxy. The Kree from Captain Marvel, the Asgardians from the Thor films, the Sovereign from Guardians of the Galaxy, the Xandarians, the Sakarans. The list goes on. Nearly all of them look exactly like humans with minor cosmetic differences. The theory proposes that these species share human DNA because they actually descended from Earth humans who were abducted thousands or millions of years ago by advanced beings. The evidence starts with the Celestials. These godlike entities are established in Eternals as having visited Earth 650 million years ago. The film confirms they experimented on early life forms to create the Eternals and Deviants. If they experimented on Earth once, they could have returned multiple times throughout human history. Captain Marvel reveals the Kree visited Earth in the 1990s and had been monitoring the planet. Mar-Vell's presence on Earth suggests the Kree had longer-term interest in humanity. Their blue skin could represent genetic drift after millennia of evolution on Hala. The Asgardians present compelling evidence through their own mythology. They visited Earth regularly enough to become the basis for Norse legends. Odin specifically refers to Earth as a place they protected for generations. Their physical compatibility with humans, demonstrated through Thor's relationships, suggests shared ancestry rather than convergent evolution. The Collector's Museum in Guardians of the Galaxy contains what appears to be a human labeled as being from Earth, implying humans are considered collectible specimens across the galaxy. Even the Sovereign, with their golden skin and genetically engineered society, maintain the same basic human body structure. Their obsession with genetic perfection could stem from attempting to enhance their original human template. This theory provides an in-universe explanation for why Star-Lord can breathe on every planet he visits, and why species from opposite ends of the galaxy can biologically reproduce with each other. Horst was a part of the Gestapo, from Ratatouille. In the film, Horst is one of the cooks working at Gusteau's restaurant in Paris. During a conversation with Linguini, he casually mentions his criminal past, including that he killed a man with his thumb. The theory suggests that Horst's violent history stems from his time serving in the Gestapo during World War II. The evidence begins with Horst's age. Based on his appearance, he would have been the right age to serve during the 1940s. His matter-of-fact admission about taking a life, delivered without remorse or emotion, mirrors the detached brutality associated with wartime operatives. The setting also supports this theory. Ratatouille takes place in Paris, a city that was occupied by German forces during the war. Former Gestapo members who remained in France after the war would have needed to blend into society and disappear into ordinary jobs. Horst's vague references to his past suggest he's deliberately hiding something significant. He mentions multiple crimes, but never provides specific details or context. This evasiveness could indicate he's concealing a far darker history than simple criminal activity. The casual nature of his confession about killing someone with his thumb stands out as particularly cold. This method suggests hand-to-hand combat training or interrogation experience, rather than typical criminal violence. The Force is an omnipotent god, from the Star Wars saga. Throughout the Star Wars films, the Force is presented as an energy field that binds the galaxy together. Jedi and Sith can manipulate this energy to perform extraordinary feats. This theory suggests the Force is not merely an energy field, but a conscious, all-powerful deity that actively shapes galactic events. The evidence begins with the Chosen One prophecy. Anakin Skywalker has no father and was conceived directly by the Force itself, similar to virgin birth narratives in Earth religions. The Force deliberately created Anakin to bring balance, showing intentional design rather than random chance. The will of the Force is referenced constantly throughout the films. Qui-Gon Jinn speaks of following the Force's will. Jedi meditate to understand what the Force wants them to do. This implies the Force has desires and intentions, characteristics of a conscious being rather than passive energy. The Force demonstrates knowledge of future events. Jedi receive visions showing things that have not yet happened. Yoda sees the rise of the Empire before it occurs. This suggests the Force exists outside normal time, another trait associated with divine beings. Force ghosts provide additional evidence. Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin retain their consciousness after death through the Force. They exist in what appears to be an afterlife, speaking to living characters and offering guidance. This mirrors religious concepts of eternal souls dwelling with a higher power. The Force actively intervenes in galactic affairs beyond individual Force users. Luke's torpedoes turn at impossible angles to destroy the Death Star. Anakin survives injuries that should kill him. Rey and Kylo Ren develop their Force bond across vast distances. These moments suggest deliberate divine intervention. Simba caused the drought. This theory comes from Disney's The Lion King. In the film, young Simba flees the Pride Lands after believing he caused his father Mufasa's death. When he returns years later as an adult, the kingdom has become a barren wasteland under Scar's rule. The theory argues that Simba himself, not Scar, is responsible for this ecological collapse. The evidence centers on the concept of the circle of life, which the film presents as a delicate natural balance. When Simba abandons his destined role as king, he breaks this circle. The drought and famine begin specifically after Simba leaves, not before. The Pride Lands were still lush and green immediately following Mufasa's death, when Scar took power. Rafiki tells Simba that the land has dried up because Simba is not there. He states this directly, suggesting the kingdom needs its true king to restore balance. The moment Simba returns and accepts his role, rain falls on the Pride Lands, ending the drought almost immediately. This instant restoration implies a spiritual or mystical connection between the rightful king and the land's prosperity. The film establishes that the Pride Lands operate under a kind of monarchy tied to natural order. Simba's abdication of responsibility created a cosmic imbalance that manifested as environmental disaster, while Scar's poor leadership contributed to the chaos. The theory suggests the fundamental cause was Simba's absence from his rightful place in the circle of life. SpongeBob and Patrick actually died. This theory comes from the SpongeBob SquarePants movie from 2004. In the film, SpongeBob and Patrick travel to Shell City to retrieve King Neptune's crown and save Mr. Krabs. When they arrive at Shell City, they discover it's actually a gift shop filled with dried-out sea creatures. The two get caught under a heat lamp and slowly dry out as the lamp evaporates all their moisture. The scene shows them completely dried up and motionless. A nearby hard hat diver starts crying over their bodies, and his tears fall onto them. The tears somehow revive SpongeBob and Patrick, and they escape Shell City to continue their journey. The theory suggests they actually died under that heat lamp. Everything that happens after Shell City takes place in the afterlife or in their final moments of consciousness. The tear revival scene is too convenient and fantastical, even by SpongeBob standards. Real tears wouldn't rehydrate dried sea sponges and starfish back to life. Supporters of this theory point to how the movie's final act becomes increasingly surreal. SpongeBob and Patrick gain the ability to rock out so hard they turn Plankton's mind-controlled slaves back to normal. They also ride David Hasselhoff's pectoral muscles across the ocean at superhuman speeds. The escalation in absurdity after the Shell City scene suggests a departure from reality. The movie never addresses how they actually survived or recovered from complete dehydration. The film simply moves past it as if nothing happened. Calhoun and her entire squad were scripted to die, from Wreck-It Ralph. In the film, Sergeant Calhoun is a tough-as-nails soldier from the first-person shooter game Hero's Duty, where players battle against an endless swarm of deadly cybugs. Her character comes with a pre-programmed tragic backstory where her fiancé was eaten by a cybug on their wedding day because she failed to do a perimeter check. The theory suggests that within the actual Hero's Duty game, Calhoun and her entire Marine squad are designed to eventually lose and be killed by the cybugs. This would make Hero's Duty similar to games like Space Invaders or Galaga, where victory is temporary and defeat is inevitable. Several pieces of evidence support this. First, Calhoun's entire personality revolves around loss and trauma, which only makes sense if her character was specifically programmed with failure built into her story. The developers gave her the saddest backstory they could, suggesting that tragedy is core to her character design. Second, the cybugs are presented as an unstoppable force that multiplies and overwhelms everything in their path. They are designed to be the ultimate threat that cannot be permanently defeated, only temporarily held back. This matches the design philosophy of classic arcade shooters, where enemies become faster and more numerous until the player inevitably loses. Third, the game itself is structured as an endless tower climb, where players fight wave after wave of increasingly difficult enemies. There is no final boss or ending, just survival for as long as possible before being overwhelmed. This gameplay loop requires that the defenders ultimately fail, so the next player can insert their quarter and try again. Duloc was massacred from the movie Shrek. In the first Shrek film, Duloc is the obsessively orderly kingdom ruled by the diminutive Lord Farquaad. The kingdom is known for its strict rules, perfect cleanliness, and intolerance of fairy tale creatures. At the end of the movie, Farquaad is eaten by dragon during his wedding to Princess Fiona, leaving Duloc without a ruler. The theory suggests that Duloc and its inhabitants were completely wiped out after Farquaad's death. The most compelling evidence is that Duloc never appears again in any of the sequels. Not in Shrek 2, not in Shrek the Third, not in Shrek Forever After. The kingdom is never mentioned, never referenced, and no citizens of Duloc are ever seen again. This is particularly strange considering how prominent the location was in the first film. Additionally, there is no established heir or successor to Farquaad. When he dies, there is no one left to rule or maintain order in the kingdom. The rigid control he maintained likely meant that without him, chaos would have immediately followed. Some point to Dragon's attack during the wedding scene. She bursts through the church and causes massive destruction before eating Farquaad. The theory suggests she may have continued her rampage throughout the kingdom after consuming its ruler, burning down buildings and eliminating the population. Others suggest that without Farquaad's iron-fisted rule, the fairy tale creatures he had persecuted may have returned to exact revenge on the kingdom and its complicit citizens. Krabby Patty crab meat. This theory comes from the SpongeBob SquarePants series and suggests that the secret ingredient in Krabby Patties is crab meat. In SpongeBob SquarePants, the Krusty Krab is a fast food restaurant owned by Mr. Krabs, a crab. The restaurant's signature item is the Krabby Patty, a burger with a secret formula that Mr. Krabs guards obsessively. The theory proposes that this secret ingredient is actually crab meat, meaning Mr. Krabs is selling his own species for profit. The evidence starts with the name itself. The burgers are called Krabby Patties, spelled with a K like Mr. Krabs' name. Throughout the series, Mr. Krabs demonstrates extreme greed and a willingness to do almost anything for money. He has sold out SpongeBob, charged absurd prices, and shown little concern for ethics when profit is involved. Another piece of evidence is how rare crabs are in Bikini Bottom. Mr. Krabs appears to be one of the only crabs in the entire town. His daughter Pearl is a whale, not a crab, and his mother is one of the few other crabs ever shown. The scarcity of crabs in the area raises questions about where they might have gone. The show occasionally hints at dark secrets regarding the Krabby Patty formula. The recipe is treated as extremely valuable and dangerous knowledge. In some episodes, the secret formula is shown to contain disturbing or unexpected ingredients, though never fully revealed. This theory suggests Mr. Krabs' success came from eliminating his competition in the most literal and profitable way possible. Humans went extinct in Ice Age series. This theory comes from the Ice Age franchise, the animated films that follow a group of prehistoric animals including Manny the Mammoth, Sid the Sloth, Diego the Saber-toothed Tiger, and Crash the Saber-toothed Ground Sloth, and Diego the Saber-toothed Tiger as they navigate life during various Ice Age periods. In the first Ice Age film from 2002, humans play a significant role in the story. The main plot centers around the animal trio returning a human baby named Roshan to his tribe. The humans are shown living in groups, hunting, and surviving in the harsh Ice Age environment. They are a present and active part of the world. However, in all the sequels that follow, humans essentially vanish from the franchise. Ice Age, The Meltdown, Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs, Ice Age Continental Drift, and Ice Age Collision Course feature no human characters whatsoever. The world becomes entirely populated by talking animals with their own societies, and no explanation is ever given for where the humans went. The theory suggests that sometime between the first film and the sequels, humanity went extinct. The complete absence of humans, despite their prominent role in the original movie, points to something catastrophic happening to the species. The animals never mention humans, never encounter human settlements or artifacts, and appear to have filled the ecological and social roles that humans once occupied. The films take place over many years, and various global catastrophes occur throughout the series, including massive floods, continental shifts, and asteroid threats. Any of these events could have wiped out the human population while the animals survived. Toy Story 3: Holocaust Allegory. This theory from Toy Story 3 suggests the film contains deliberate parallels to the Holocaust, particularly in its third act. In Toy Story 3, Andy's toys are accidentally donated to Sunnyside Daycare, where they discover a prison-like hierarchy controlled by Lotso the bear. The toys eventually face destruction in a garbage incinerator before being saved at the last moment. The theory points to several dark parallels. The toys are rounded up, transported against their will, and arrive at what initially seems like a pleasant place, but turns out to be a system of control and suffering. Sunnyside operates with authoritarian rule, where toys are sorted, categorized, and assigned to different rooms based on perceived value. Lotso and his enforcers maintain order through intimidation and violence, with escape nearly impossible. The toys are essentially prisoners awaiting their fate. The most direct parallel comes in the incinerator sequence, where the toys hold hands and accept their incoming doom together, mirroring the stories of victims facing their final moments with dignity and community. The garbage system itself functions as a method of systematic destruction, with toys being processed through conveyor belts toward the flames. Some theorists note the visual of toys being herded together, the separation of groups, and the ultimate confrontation with fire carries unmistakable imagery. The film's themes of survival, maintaining hope in hopeless circumstances, and finding meaning through community during persecution all align with this darker interpretation. Whether intentional or coincidental, the parallels have sparked significant discussion about the film's subtext. Walking Dead Afterlife Closed. This theory comes from the Walking Dead television series. The theory proposes that the zombie outbreak occurred because the gates to the afterlife literally shut down. When people die, their souls have nowhere to go, so they remain trapped in their reanimated corpses. This would explain why every single person who dies becomes a walker, regardless of how they died, since the issue is not a virus or infection, but a fundamental break in the natural order of death itself. The evidence supporters point to starts with the global nature of the outbreak. The walkers appeared everywhere simultaneously, with no clear patient zero or origin point. Traditional disease spread patterns do not apply here. The series establishes that everyone is already infected. Death from any cause triggers reanimation. A person who dies from a fall or natural causes will still turn. This suggests the problem is with death itself rather than a pathogen. Dr. Jenner at the CDC reveals that whatever causes reanimation only restarts the brainstem, the most primitive part of the brain. The person themselves, their consciousness and soul, never returns. Supporters argue this is because the soul cannot move on to its proper destination. The walkers show no signs of decomposition slowing down or stopping despite biological death. They continue functioning long past when a normal corpse would break down completely. This supernatural persistence suggests something beyond normal biology is at work. The theory also points to the complete absence of any spiritual or supernatural intervention throughout the series. No divine help arrives. No answers come from beyond. The afterlife remains completely silent, which theorists argue is because it has closed entirely. Del's trunk in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles contains his wife's corpse. This theory comes from the 1987 comedy starring Steve Martin and John Candy. In the film, shower curtain ring salesman Del Griffith travels cross-country with uptight businessman Neil Page. Throughout their journey, Del frequently mentions his wife Marie and speaks about her in present tense. He also carries a large trunk that he guards carefully and refuses to let anyone else handle. The theory suggests Del is actually transporting his deceased wife's body in this trunk. Several pieces of evidence support this dark interpretation. First, the trunk is unusually heavy for someone just carrying shower curtain ring samples. Del struggles with it constantly, and becomes agitated whenever anyone tries to help him with it or gets too close to it. Second, Del never makes any phone calls to his wife during the entire trip despite being away from home. He talks about her constantly, but never actually contacts her. Third, in the final act, Neil realizes Del has no home to return to for Thanksgiving. When Neil asks where he's going, Del admits he has nowhere to go. This revelation reframes all of Del's earlier stories about his wife and home life. The theory posits that Marie recently passed away, Del lost their home, and he's been traveling with her remains because he cannot accept her death or afford a proper burial. His constant stories about her represent his denial and grief. The shower curtain ring sales job barely sustains him as he wanders without purpose. This interpretation transforms the comedy into a tragedy about a widower unable to move forward after losing everything. Skyler White's self-removal from Breaking Bad. This theory suggests that Skyler White takes her own life after the events of the series finale. In the show, Skyler is the wife of Walter White, a chemistry teacher turned methamphetamine manufacturer. Throughout the series, she becomes increasingly traumatized by her husband's criminal activities, facing threats, being complicit in money laundering, and watching her family fall apart. The theory stems from analyzing Skyler's mental state in the final episode. When Walter visits her for the last time, she appears emotionally drained and defeated. Her entire life has been destroyed. Her brother-in-law Hank is dead because of Walter. Her children have been taken from her temporarily. She faces potential prosecution and imprisonment. She has no money, no support system, and carries the guilt of being involved in Walter's empire. Supporters of this theory point to the symbolism in the final scene between Walter and Skyler. The way she stares blankly, her complete emotional exhaustion, and her lack of any hope for the future all suggest someone who has given up entirely. The creators deliberately left her fate ambiguous, showing her alone in her small apartment with no clear path forward. Additionally, the theory notes that Breaking Bad often showed consequences for everyone involved in Walter's world. Nearly every major character either dies or has their life irreparably damaged. Leaving Skyler to simply continue living would be inconsistent with the show's themes about the devastating ripple effects of Walter's choices. The final evidence comes from Skyler's character arc showing progressive psychological deterioration, including her walking into a pool fully clothed in Season 5, which many viewers interpreted as a cry for help or a failed attempt at self-harm. Madagascar is hell. This theory comes from the 2005 DreamWorks animated film Madagascar. The theory suggests that the 4 zoo animals never actually made it to the island of Madagascar. Instead, they died during their journey, and the island represents some form of the afterlife, specifically a purgatorial or hellish realm. The film follows Alex the lion, Marty the zebra, Gloria the hippo, and Melman the giraffe as they escape from the Central Park Zoo, get tranquilized, loaded onto a ship, and eventually wash up on the shores of Madagascar. The evidence begins with the shipwreck itself. The animals are shown in crates that fall off a cargo ship in the middle of the ocean. The chances of surviving such an incident, drifting across open water, and landing safely on shore are astronomically low. Once on the island, the animals encounter the lemurs led by King Julian. The lemurs behave in bizarre and unsettling ways that don't match normal animal behavior. King Julian, in particular, acts as a chaotic, hedonistic leader who encourages self-destructive behavior and seems to rule over the island with arbitrary and cruel logic. Some interpret him as a devil-like figure presiding over this realm. Each character faces their own personal torment. Alex discovers his predatory nature and nearly attacks his best friend. Marty realizes his dream of the wild isn't what he hoped for. Gloria and Melman confront their deepest fears and insecurities. The island forces each animal to face the worst parts of themselves. The sequels support this reading. Despite multiple attempts, the animals never successfully return to their normal lives in New York. They remain trapped in an endless cycle of trying to go home, but being pulled back into increasingly absurd adventures. They're unable to escape their fate. Mort theory from Madagascar suggests that Mort, the small mouse lemur obsessed with King Julian's feet, is not what he appears to be. The theory proposes that Mort is an ancient, immortal being with dark powers far beyond any other character in the film. In the original Madagascar movie, Mort appears as a cute, harmless sidekick to King Julian. He rarely speaks and seems simple-minded. However, evidence from the broader Madagascar franchise reveals disturbing details about his true nature. The Netflix series All Hail King. Julian provides the bulk of the evidence. The show reveals that Mort has lived for an extremely long time and has had 12 previous wives who all mysteriously disappeared. Mort displays superhuman strength on multiple occasions, easily overpowering much larger characters. He survives situations that should be fatal, including being crushed, burned, and falling from extreme heights. The series also introduces Mort's dark alter ego called Mordecus Khan, revealed to be one of many personalities living inside Mort's mind. These personalities include criminals, warriors, and ancient beings. One episode shows that Mort has his own pocket dimension inside his body where these personalities exist. Mort demonstrates knowledge of events he should have no way of knowing, and speaks languages that are extinct or unknown. He displays reality warping abilities and seems to exist outside normal rules of time and space. The show hints that Mort may have connections to cosmic or supernatural forces that predate the other characters by millennia. Axiom cannibals from Wall-E. In the 2008 Pixar film, humanity has abandoned Earth and lives aboard a massive spaceship called the Axiom. The passengers have become entirely dependent on the ship's systems, including their food supply, which comes from cups filled with a mysterious liquid substance. The theory suggests that during the 700 years humans spent on the Axiom, the ship's food supply may have run critically low, forcing the passengers to resort to consuming the deceased. The main evidence centers around the nature of the food itself. Throughout the film, every meal comes in the form of an identical colored liquid served in cups. The captain mentions that the ship has been in space for 7 centuries, yet there is no sign of agriculture, livestock, or any traditional food production on board. The cups simply appear through automated systems, with no explanation of where the contents originate. Supporters of the theory point to the suspicious vagueness around the food source. The passengers never question what they are drinking, suggesting a possible cover-up by the ship's artificial intelligence. The complete absence of any food production facilities on a ship designed for indefinite space travel raises questions about sustainability. The theory also notes the large number of humans who would have died over 700 years, and the lack of any visible cemetery or disposal system for bodies. Combined with the mysterious food supply, this creates a disturbing possibility about how the Axiom maintained its population.